Chapter 16:15. When Song Qing-shu and his entourage arrived at the study, they discovered that a man was pacing back and forth, clearly very anxious. Hearing the commotion, he turned his head and revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He quickly walked over and said, "Brother Song, no, I should call you Prince Qi." Song Qing-shu also recognized the other person. It was Lu Guanying. He could not help but smile and said, "Brother Lu, please sit." As he spoke, he subconsciously looked around. That shy young woman, Cheng Yaojia, did not seem to be present. Lu Guanying seemed to have guessed his thoughts. He explained, "This time, I am on a mission. It is not convenient to bring Miss Yaojia along." He felt embarrassed when he said this. After all, Miss Cheng was his wife. This was not a big deal. If not for his current crippled body and the great kindness he had received from Song Qing-shu, no man would be able to accept such a thing. Therefore, he was currently fully focused on his official career. He hoped that he could bestow his wife a child and bring glory to his family. However, he still lacked an heir. Thinking of this, he felt somewhat depressed. He had carried out this plan for so long, but his wife's belly had not moved at all. Sometimes, he even suspected that Song Qing-shu, in order to maintain this long-term relationship with his wife, had deliberately not allowed her to become pregnant. But now, the other party was like the sun at high noon. Regardless of status or ability, the difference was too great. He did not dare to urge the other party. Hearing Lu Guaning's words, Song Qing-shu's face heated up. He hastily changed the topic and asked, "Brother Lu, why have you come to Golden Snake Camp as an envoy?" Agio and Yelu Yin were originally somewhat curious about Lu Guaning's sudden mention of Cheng Yaojia. Now that they were talking about business, they hastily gathered their thoughts and sat down beside Song Qing-shu. However, Yelu Yin hesitated for a moment. In the end, she did not sit with Agio and instead stood beside him. Lu Guaning hastily saluted the two women and said, "Greetings to the 9th princess. Greetings to Miss Yelu." He naturally knew that Song Qing-shu had married Yelu Yin yesterday. At the same time, he was secretly amazed at the appearance of the two women. One was elegant and refined, the other tall and slender. Song Qing-shu truly enjoyed all the blessings of the world. His wife's appearance was inferior to the 9th princess's, and her figure was inferior to Yelu Yan's. Lu Guaning did not know why Song Qing-shu kept thinking about her. However, if Song Qing-shu stopped thinking about it, Lu Guaning would become anxious instead. It was because of the relationship between his wife and the other party that he was able to get close to this thick thigh. Even Han Xingzhou saw him in a new light. From a Jianghu person, he gradually became a core member of the court. Of course, this was largely due to his illness. Otherwise, as a man, it would be very difficult for him to make such a decision. Agio and Yelu Yin hastily returned the greeting. Only then did Lu Guaning turn to Song Qing-shu and say with a bitter smile, "The Prince of Qi should know why I have come." Lu Guaning smiled wryly at Song Qing-shu and said, "Does Brother Lu want to see the scenery of the north?" Lu Guaning was speechless. Seeing that he did not respond, he could only say, "Prince Qi must be joking. This time, Minister Han sent me to ask about the Golden Snake Camp." In the past, the envoys had returned empty-handed. This time, Han Xingzhou had specially sent him here because he could see that he had a good relationship with Song Qing-shu. If he returned empty-handed this time, his position in Han Xingzhou's heart would probably plummet in the future. "Oh!" Song Qing-shu showed a meaningful expression but did not express his opinion. Lu Guaning gritted his teeth and continued, "Originally, the great Song, Northern Liao, and Golden Snake Camp had agreed to attack the Jin together. But not long ago, the envoy sent to Liao was killed. Shui's men of the Imperial City Department came to Shangjing and stirred up trouble. They kidnapped the Liao ministers and wreaked havoc in Liao's prison, killing many Liao soldiers. Now, the Liao Emperor is furious and refuses to cooperate with us." "Oh, really? Isn't Shui's men from the Song Kingdom?" "Why?" Song Qing-shu asked deliberately. In fact, he knew more than anyone else about Liao's affairs. Lu Guaning was so angry that he hit the table and said bitterly, "It's all because of Jia Sherdao. Shui Yi's men are from the Shui family, and the Shui family has always been in cahoots with the Jia family. Jia Sherdao doesn't want to see Minister Han succeed in the northern expedition and increase his prestige, so he deliberately sent people to sabotage the northern expedition and hinder Minister Han. Song Qingshu said playfully, "Doesn't your emperor care?" Lu Guaning smiled bitterly and said, "The power of the imperial court is extremely complicated. It's a long-standing tradition for all forces to hinder each other. How can the emperor care? What's more, there's no evidence that Jia Sherdao ordered this. The most he can do is punish Shui Yi's men. However, with Jia Sherdao and the Shui family backing him up, the punishment for Shui Yi's men will most likely not be painful." Song Qingshu opened his mouth and said, "Brother Lu, I more or less guessed why you're here, but our Golden Snake Battalion has a lot of headaches right now. Previously, the Liao Nation was in chaos. Yalu Chukai and Xiao Banhe's families defected, and the Golden Snake Battalion took them in, offending the Liao Nation. Now, we've taken in the southern courtyard's King Xiao Feng. I heard that Yalu Hongji is furious, and he's planning to send troops to settle accounts with us." Lu Guaning said confusedly, "But I heard that some powerful officials in Liao have rebelled recently, and they've just been pacified. Now that Liao is unstable, I'm afraid Yalu Hongji doesn't have the energy to send troops." Song Qingshu looked at him in surprise, thinking that now that Lu Guaning was in the center of the imperial court, his vision was indeed different from before, and it would be difficult to fool him. Clearing his throat, Song Qingshu continued, "The threat of Liao is only one of the problems. The more troublesome ones are the internal problems. Brother Lu, you should know the situation of the Golden Snake Camp in the past. We've risen too fast in the past 2 years, and it's inevitable that our foundation is unstable. Many of the rebel forces that used to be on equal footing with the Golden Snake Camp have long been dissatisfied. In addition, most of the territories under our command were taken from the Qin Kingdom, and many of the remaining officials and gentry of the Qin Kingdom are still in many counties. They also have many regimental troops. Recently, we've received news that the separatist rebel forces have colluded with the remaining armed forces of the Qin Kingdom. Now, Wulian Mountain Rizhao and many places in Huaibei are their territories, and they're preparing to defeat us and replace us. In fact, Lu Guaning knew a thing or two about the internal instability of the Golden Snake Camp. With King Qi's current prestige and ability, these people are nothing more than clay chickens and pottery dogs. Even without him personally taking action, they will collapse." Song Qingshu couldn't help but laugh. "Brother Lu, you've been with Minister Han for so long, and you're getting better at flattering people. If I were that amazing, I wouldn't have such a headache." Hearing Lu Guaning's joking tone, Lu Guaning couldn't help but laugh. "This is the truth. On the contrary, it's Minister Han who is giving me a headache. Right now, everything is not going well, and the matter of the northern expedition has become too big. It can be said that the arrow on the bowstring has no choice but to be released. Right now, Minister Han is under pressure from all sides. Even if he isn't ready, he must send troops as soon as possible. Therefore, if King Qi doesn't send troops to help, Minister Han really won't have the chance." At this point, Song Qingshu really couldn't refuse. After all, he had a certain friendship with Han Xingzhou. To a certain extent, others also regarded him as a member of Han Xingzhou's faction. "This time, since Brother Lu has come personally, I won't refuse to give you face. How about this? I'll let you know that I will quickly settle the resistance at 5 Lotus Mountain, and then cooperate with Minister Han to send troops." "That's good." Lu Guaning was overjoyed. Although the other party didn't promise to immediately send troops, the official northern expedition wouldn't start in a day or two. In the early stages, small groups of troops were needed to be sent to test the waters. By the time the official northern expedition began, the Golden Snake Camp should have already pacified the interior. At that time, they could launch a pincer attack from both sides. Chapter 16:16. After discussing the matter of dispatching troops, Song Qingshu smiled and said, "Brother Lu, it was not easy for you to come here. In a moment, I will hold a welcoming dinner for you and have a good drink. Lu Ying hastily stood up and waved his hand, saying, No, I am in a hurry to return and report to Minister Han. He has been anxiously awaiting news from this side. I cannot delay. I hope the Prince of Qi will forgive me. Worried that such a refusal would offend the other party, he hastily added, In the future, when the Prince of Qi comes to Jiangnan, I will definitely bring my wife to apologize and properly entertain the Prince of Qi. He was worried that his status was not high enough and deliberately brought up his wife, Cheng Yaojia's name. How could Song Qingshu not understand the meaning behind his words? He thought to himself, properly entertain? What kind of hospitality? Thinking of Cheng Yaojia's bashful panting, he could not help but feel his heart warm up. I have sinned. I have sinned. Song Qingshu hastily gathered his thoughts. Since Brother Lu has official business to attend to, I will not force you to stay. Come, select some good horses and prepare travel expenses as well as specialties from the north. Lu Guining declined several times, but ultimately could not accept his hospitality. He could only accept the gifts and take his leave. Song Qingshu deliberately saw him out to show his closeness. Before parting, he said, Brother Lu, remember to send my regards to Minister Han. Of course. Lu Guining hurriedly nodded his head in agreement. In fact, the Prince of Qi's agreement to dispatch troops is the greatest greeting to Minister Han. Song Qingshu smiled slightly, but did not explain that his so-called dispatch of troops was only for show. The Jin Kingdom was now his property. How could he allow his own people to fight his own people? After seeing Lu Guining off, Song Qingshu asked Ajio, Is the situation at Mount Wullian serious? Ajio replied, At present, it does not seem to be serious. However, Mount Wullian controls the strategic road from north to south. Once they are fully fledged, whether they move north or south, they will easily destabilize our heartland. Shandong was divided into two parts by the Taiying mountain range, which ran from the northwest to the southeast. To the north was the old land of the state of Qi, while to the south was the old land of the state of Lu. During the spring and autumn period, the state of Qi and state of Lu surrounded the Taiying mountain range for hundreds of years. However, other than the state of Qi and state of Lu that everyone was familiar with, there was another country in Shandong, and that was the state of Zhu. The Taiying mountain range did not extend all the way to the sea. It was still a distance away from the sea when it turned southwest to form Mount Yiming. Thus, a valley was formed between it and the coastal Mount Wullian. The foot of Mount Yiming and Mount Wullian formed two rivers, the Yi River and the Mu River. Thus, this valley was also called the Yimu River Valley. This valley was not considered narrow, and there was enough land in the middle to support the population. That was why this place used to be the territory of the Zhu Kingdom. This was because this valley was connected to the northern Lu Plains and the Donglai Hills. It could be said that it was a land that all armies fought over. After the Zhu Kingdom was destroyed, the Qi and Chu kingdoms had been at loggerheads around this valley. The eastern section of the Qi Great Wall was built at the northern exit of this valley. That was why Ajio was worried that once those separatist powers took advantage of the Golden Snake Camp's emptiness, whether it was following the Yimu River Valley north to the northern Lu Plains or south to the Jianghua lands, it would shake the foundations of the Golden Snake Camp. It was not that the idea of encircling and suppressing them had never occurred to them. However, once the army advanced, those separatist powers would scatter and hide in Mount Wullian and Mount Yiming. They were simply powerless to act. After listening to Ajio's report, Song Qingshu nodded. As the saying goes, a single spark can start a prairie fire. They must not be allowed to grow. They must be nipped in the bud. It just so happens that I have brought Xiao Feng back this time. Let him lead the troops to deal with those separatist powers. With his reputation, he should be able to break the enemy's fighting spirit to the greatest extent. However, pay attention to appeasement as the main focus and encirclement and suppression as a support. Ajio hesitated. Let Brother Xiao lead the troops alone? Because of Yelu Yan's presence, she could not say it directly. If Xiao Feng were to lead the troops directly, it would be easy for him to grow. At present, The relationship between the two parties was not obvious. This kind of arrangement was not suitable. Brother Xiao has just arrived. If we rashly let him lead the troops, it may cause some of the old members of the Golden Snake camp to be dissatisfied. So when the time comes, we will send another general to go with him. Song Qingshu had already thought of the appropriate arrangements. Jiu nodded. Are you going to leave again next? Saying this, intentionally or unintentionally, he glanced at Yelu Yan. He purposely brought it up in front of her just to let her hear it. As expected, when she heard that Song Qingshu was going to leave, Yelu Yan's expression changed slightly. Brother Song, where are you going? Song Qingshu explained, the Southern Song dynasty is about to launch a northern expedition. Previously, we had reached an agreement with their court. We have no choice but to send troops to cooperate. However, soldiers are also weapons. We had to be cautious. So, I need to go to the front line in advance to investigate. The reason why he wanted to send troops was firstly because of the previous exchange of interests with the Southern Song dynasty. Secondly, he wanted to not lose the hearts of the Han people. After all, these years, the foreign tribes were strong. The Han people were looking forward to the rise of the Han dynasty. Naturally, the Ming dynasty had been destroyed. Naturally, the only one left was the Southern Song dynasty. Therefore, the Han people in the world had high hopes for the Southern Song dynasty's northern expedition. If Song Qingshu went back on his word and effected the northern expedition, it would be a great crime. Brother Song, let me go with you. Yelu Yin blurted out. They had just gotten married. How could she bear to part so quickly? Song Qingshu shook his head. This trip will be full of danger. It will be too inconvenient for you to go. Moreover, I can come and go freely by myself. If you go, I will have to divert my attention to take care of you. At that time, my efficiency will be greatly reduced. Jiu also comforted her. Sister Yin, if you want to help Brother Song, there are many ways. Didn't I tell you before? We have to help him deal with a lot of government affairs. I am short of manpower here, so I need you to stay here to help me. Yelu Yin also knew that she would be a burden to her husband if she went, so she had to nod. Okay then. Her tone was full of grievance. Song Qingshu smiled and took her hand. I'm not leaving immediately. No matter what, I have to stay here for a few days. I can accompany you. Yelu Yan's face instantly turned red. She hurriedly said, It's more important. Brother Song, you don't have to worry about me like this. I'm fine. Jiu also couldn't help laughing. Sister Yin is really considerate. In the following period of time, Song Qingshu met the middle and high-level confidants of the Golden Snake camp during the day. He was away all year round, so he needed to get close to these people. At night, he accompanied his new wife Yelu Yin to make up for the fact that they had to be separated right after they got married. Yelu Yin didn't know whether it was because she was instructed by her father or something else, but after a day or two, she pushed Song Qingshu to Jiu's place to show that she didn't want to spoil him, which made Jiu very embarrassed. As a result, the two women pushed each other. Song Qingshu courageously suggested that they should just go together, but the result was obvious. He was mercilessly rejected and criticized by the two women. Just like that, a few days passed. Before leaving, Song Qingshu specially looked for Zi and told her, Be careful with your words and actions. Don't reveal any flaws. If there is any situation, contact me by pigeon. Jiu will arrange a special channel for you. Finally, pay attention. Pay attention to protect yourself. Master, are you afraid that I will be taken advantage of? Zi blinked her eyes and asked with a smile. Song Qingshu said impatiently, Brother Xiao is a gentleman. He won't take the initiative to do anything to you. He's just reminding you just in case. If I'm accidentally taken advantage of, will you abandon me, Master? Zi asked curiously. Song Qingshu lightly glanced at her. What do you think? Zi's heart trembled, but she quickly smiled and said, If that really happens, I'll keep pretending and compensate my sister to Master. Isn't this the custom of some tribes in the prairie? Chapter 16-17. Despite his reluctance, Song Qingshu had to leave the Golden Snake camp and go to Daxing Prefecture of the Jin Kingdom. Along the way, he met people fleeing north from time to time. Apparently, They had to flee their homes after hearing that a war was about to break out in the south. Interestingly, most of them were Han people. Song Qingshu found it strange at first. Shouldn't the Han people be welcoming the Southern Song dynasty's northern expedition? But he soon realized that it had been a long time since he came to this world. He gradually understood that the people at the bottom of the social ladder were busy with 3 meals a day and struggling with food and clothing. They didn't have the leisure to care about national affairs. Those who had the energy to care about these things were usually the hot-blooded scholars who came from well-off families. For the people at the bottom of the social ladder, war meant danger to their lives, starvation, and homelessness. When the people prosper, the people suffer. When the people perish, the people suffer. Song Qingshu was never a saint who bemoaned the state of the universe and the fate of mankind, but he was deeply touched by the miserable situation of some refugees. He became more determined to unify the world as soon as possible and keep the people away from the chaos of war. They rushed to Daxing Manor without stopping. The number of guards at the city gate was doubled compared to usual, and the streets were filled with soldiers patrolling everywhere. It was obvious that the atmosphere in the city was much more solemn and tense than usual. Obviously, it was because of the impending war. Song Qingshu hesitated for a moment and decided to go to Tang Qua's mansion first. After all, it was broad daylight. Even with his superb lightness skill, it was not easy to sneak into the heavily guarded Jin Kingdom's palace. When he was near Tang Qua's mansion, Song Qingshu looked at the guards at the gate and felt depressed. I didn't expect that I can't go through the front door to my own home. It's so depressing to think about it. In fact, it was easy for him to enter as Tang Qua Bien, but he didn't know if the other Tang Qua Bien was in the mansion. If there were 2 Tang Qua Bien at the same time, it would be troublesome. Of course, if he said Song Qingshu's name, he could enter openly. After all, he was Tang Qua Bien's sworn brother. But now that the Southern Song dynasty's northern expedition was imminent, all the Han people in the world were paying attention to it. He didn't want to get into trouble. After hesitating for a while near the entrance, he finally made a detour to a secluded wall in the backyard. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was watching, he quietly climbed over the wall. Now that Tang Qua Bien was the head of all the officials in the Jin Kingdom, his mansion was naturally heavily guarded. Song Qingshu found many hidden sentries along the way. Thanks to his familiarity with the situation in the mansion, he did not trigger the alarm along the way. Overhearing the conversation of some servants passing by, Song Qingshu said that Tang Qua Bien was now dealing with government affairs in the study. He wondered who was pretending to be Tang Qua Bien. On the Jin side, most of the time, it was Zishan Dragon Queen Tajkis who pretended to be Tang Qua Bien, and Goodbye, who pretended to be the emperor, Wan Yanxi, who guarded the palace with Wan Yanping. But sometimes they would switch roles, so he was not sure who was in the study. Thinking of the glamorous and arrogant Zishan Dragon Queen, the gentle and moving Goodbye, and the lively and youthful Wan Yanping, Song Qingshu felt a trace of tenderness in his heart. This was like another home for him, especially Goodbye, who could bring him the warmth of a home and the tenderness of a wife. Although she always asked him to appear as Tang Qua Bien, especially when they were intimate, but why would Song Qingshu, who came from the future, care about the gains and losses of this city and land? What he cared more about was the actual benefits, so he was happy to play the role-playing game with her. Occasionally, when she was extremely aroused, he would return to his original appearance. The shyness and anger on her face made him feel a strong sense of conquest. Who is it? Thinking of some charming scenes, Song Qingshu could not help but breathe heavily. In the study, Tang Qua Bien suddenly raised his head and raised his hand, shooting a hidden weapon at Song Qingshu. Feeling the strong wind coming at him, Song Qingshu cried out in shame. He hastily stretched out his hand to block the hidden weapons and opened his palm to take a look. It turned out to be a few golden flowers. So it's Taj Tish. Song Qingshu smiled faintly. This was Zishan Dragon Queen's unique hidden weapon. Meanwhile, Tadish was in the study handling the sea of letters that had been sent in from various places. Suddenly, she heard a commotion outside her door. Without hesitation, She shot out a concealed weapon from her sleeve. After all, she had specifically instructed the servants of the residence to not take a single step into this small courtyard without her command. Sensing that the other party had neutralized her hidden weapon with a raise of his hand, Tashtish's heart shivered. She knew that the person who came was a top-notch expert, and she was not his match. Just as she was about to call for the guards to warn them, she suddenly saw the other party's appearance. Her mouth opened halfway, and she forcefully swallowed the words she was about to say. The red lips of the number one beauty of the martial arts world in the past were so tender and alluring. It's a pity that you have a full beard now. Song Qing-shu pushed open the door and said with a teasing expression. Tashtish rolled her eyes at him and raised her hand to cover her face. By the time she pulled down her sleeve, she had already restored her icy cold, peerless, and gorgeous appearance. At this moment, the guards outside heard the commotion and ran over. "My lord, what happened?" "It's nothing. Withdraw. Without my command, no one is to come near." Tashtish flicked her sleeve and closed the door, then coldly said, "Yes." Without the slightest hesitation, the group of guards silently withdrew. Song Qing-shu looked at her in surprise. "The Dragon King's skill in controlling his subordinates has truly impressed me. You are truly worthy of strict obedience. No matter what, I was once the holy maiden of the Ming Dynasty's headquarters and the head of the 4 kings of the Ming Dynasty of the Central Plains." Hearing his praise, the corners of Tashtish's lips couldn't help but curl into a beautiful arc. Song Qing-shu walked over and pulled her into his embrace, wantonly feeling the body that countless men in the martial arts world yearned for. He smiled and said, "However, the thing that makes me the happiest today isn't your well-trained subordinates, but something else." "What is it?" A faint blush flashed across Tashtish's fair cheeks. Given her character, she wasn't used to being so pampered by a man, especially one who was younger than her. Tashtish's body was plump and soft. Song Qing-shu felt as though he was hugging a ripe water lily. "I'm happy that your first reaction upon seeing me was to restore your appearance. Evidently, you've already begun to care about your image in my heart. As the saying goes, a woman dresses up for the man who pleases her. How can I not be happy?" Tashtish was startled. Could it be that she had unknowingly gradually accepted him? After all, back then, she had been half forced by him to possess her body. Although she was a little flustered, she didn't have the slightest intention of admitting it. "Who said that? I'm not used to wearing that mask anyway. My face is covered with a full beard, and it's so prickly." Song Qing-shu moved closer to her cheek and sized her up. "Let me take a look. Dragon King, your delicate skin is so sensitive to being pricked by the beard on the mask. That would be a real waste of God's gift." Being so close to him, to the point where she could even feel his breath, Tashtish's skin couldn't help but tremble slightly. Somewhat flusteredly, she got up from his embrace and said, "You're only a few years older than my daughter. Don't tease an old woman like me like I'm a little girl." Song Qing-shu laughed. "The Dragon King's skin is so smooth that it looks as though it's going to break at the slightest breeze, and your figure is still as graceful as a young girl's. When the two of us stand together, people who don't know you might even think that you're my younger sister. How am I old?" In this world, Xiao Zhao was only 15 or 16 years old, while Zishan Dragon King was only in her early 30s. Song Qing-shu was also nearing his 30s. The age gap between him and Xiao Zhao was much greater than that between him and Zishan Dragon King. Chapter 16-18. When I was roaming Jianghu in the past, whenever I met a glib-tongued libertine like you, I would definitely kill you with a single palm strike. Tata snorted and said somewhat gloomily, "Unfortunately, I can't beat you and can only listen to your nonsense." Although she said so, strangely, she didn't feel angry at all. She sighed inwardly and suddenly noticed that Song Qing-shu was in a daze. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "What's wrong with you? You seem a little unhappy." "I'm just thinking that I'm only a few years younger than you. Your child has already grown up into a young lady, but my child is nowhere to be found." I can't help but sigh with emotion. Song Qing-shu said with a bitter smile, "To some extent, you're a late bloomer." It's normal for you to have a family and a career late. Seeing the man's lonely look, Tadish somehow felt sorry for him and couldn't help but comfort him. Besides, you have so many confidants around you now. Are you afraid that no one will give birth to a son for you? Song Qingshu's eyes lit up. Dragon King is really good at comforting people. How about this, Dragon King? Give birth to a son for me. Tadish's breath caught in her throat. She thought that she must have been possessed to think of comforting him. No way. If I give birth to a son for you, how can I face my late husband and my daughter in the future? No, absolutely not. Tadish's expression changed several times as she flatly refused. Song Qingshu originally wanted to say that Mr. Silverleaf had been dead for so many years and that there was nothing to be sorry about. However, seeing the other party's intense resistance, he wisely didn't continue this topic. All right. I was just joking with you. Look at how excited you are. Song Qingshu, on the other hand, was secretly thinking that whether or not she could get pregnant was up to him, and it was not something she could control. When the time came, he just needed to irrigate her more. Even if she did not want to, she would still bear fruit. Of course, for now, he could not bear to let such a beautiful woman get pregnant so early. Don't joke with me like this in the future. Tadish was now maintaining this secret relationship with him. Although she was somewhat resistant at first, she could still reluctantly accept it since outsiders didn't know about it. However, if her husband was dead for so many years and she suddenly became pregnant, wouldn't she be ridiculed by the world? Thinking of that kind of situation, her originally cold and elegant face instantly became incomparably captivating red, as if she was a bashful young lady. Hastily clearing away those messy images from her mind, Tadish hastily changed the topic. You aren't here to chat about romance, right? Song Qingshu's expression also turned solemn. What's the situation in the south now? Although he also had his own intelligence, it was not as clear as the inside of the Jin Kingdom. In order to keep it confidential, he had not been able to send many detailed messages to the Jin Kingdom. Tajtish unfurled the map on the table and began explaining. Han Quanzhou was bestowed the title of Pacifying Order Army, as well as the overall military and political power. He also ordered every army to make preparations for a secret march. He also allocated 10,000 taels of gold from the imperial court's treasury as military supplies. This Han Xingzhou's power can be said to be unprecedented. It seems that he is determined to win this northern expedition. Hearing this, Song Qingshu was greatly moved. Generally speaking, the most powerful officials in the southern Song dynasty were the left servant Shi, who was also the assistant minister, and the right servant Shi, who was also the assistant minister of the secretariat. They were also commonly referred to as the left minister and the right minister. Below them were several political advisors who jointly assisted the government. However, there was another hidden official position in the Song dynasty. That was the true head of all the officials, ranking above the prime minister. That was the minister of Pacifying Order Army. During the northern Song dynasty, this official position was specially set up for highly virtuous old officials to show their favor. The official would come to the political affairs hall every 5 or 2 days. However, during the northern Song dynasty, this official position was only a position of the highest honor. It basically did not participate in the decision-making of the imperial court's military and national affairs. It was only during the southern Song dynasty that a great change occurred. From the founding of the southern Song dynasty to its demise, the military and political departments did not cooperate well with each other in order to avoid the restriction of power. Gradually, this official position evolved into the Political Affairs Hall and the Privy Council. However, Han Xingzhou's minister of Pacifying Order Army was less important than the previous minister of Pacifying Order Army. Instead, his power was much greater. This was because the minister of Pacifying Order Army could only intervene in important matters, while the minister of Pacifying Order Army could intervene in any matter. Although Jia Sherdao is secretly hindering him, he is already an extremely powerful official in name. Song Qingshu secretly sighed. At this time, Han Xingzhou should be at the peak of his life, but it was a pity that he was destined to fail. Tajkis continued. Han Xingzhou ordered Wu Shi to train troops in West Shu. Zhao Chun and Huang Fu Bin are preparing to send troops to take down Tang and Deng. Minister of Wuyi, Chun Shaoqing, and commander of Zhenjiang, Guijing, are training troops in Jianghuai, ready to cross the Huai River at any time. Wu Shi was Wu Tiande, who is also Ling Hu Chong in disguise. Song Qingshu thought to himself, I wonder how Ling Hu Chong will integrate West Shu after he takes office. When the time comes, it will be really troublesome to send troops from Sichuan to attack from the east. Tang and Deng referred to the Tang and Deng prefectures in the Nanyang Basin, which were located to the north of Xiangyang. It could be said that it was the only way to attack the Central Plains from Xiangyang. During the spring and autumn warring states period, Chu first destroyed many small countries in the Nanyang Basin, and then used the Nanyang Basin as a springboard to march into the Central Plains. In addition to attacking the Central Plains from the east, Nanyang Basin could also be used to attack the Central Plains from the west through Wu Pass. In the late Warring States period, Chu and Qin fought around the Nanyang Basin. In the end, Chu lost the Nanyang Basin and completely lost the capital to threaten Qin. In the last years of Qin, Liu Bang also attacked Wu Pass from the Nanyang Basin, and then he conquered Xianyang. It showed how important the Nanyang Basin was. The Tang and Deng prefectures were the gates to the south of the Nanyang Basin. As for Zhao Chun and Huang Fu Bin, he had never heard of them. However, since they were the main generals of the Central Army in such an important northern expedition, they must be famous generals of the Southern Song dynasty. Of course, compared to West Shu, Song Qingshu didn't care about them. After all, they were people that he had never heard of, so no matter how famous they were, their abilities were very limited. Song Qingshu didn't quite understand. Xianyang City was Guo Jing's base camp, so why didn't the Southern Song dynasty let him go back to Xianyang to lead the troops to attack the north, but to the east? Was it to prevent the generals from becoming too powerful? After all, the LV brothers, who were in charge of the Xianyang city, were Jia Shidao's subordinates. If Guo Jing continued to stay there, the whole Jingxiang city would probably be a piece of iron plate under Jia Shidao's control. Song Qingshu didn't have to guess to know that Han Xingzhou's efforts must have been a part of it. Now that the Southern Song dynasty is coming aggressively, it will be really troublesome when the three armies attack at the same time. Song Qingshu had a headache. He had been as fierce as a tiger before, and he had defeated Liao, the biggest threat in the north, and even ignored the Golden Snake Battalion in the east. However, he didn't expect that the Southern Song dynasty could still organize three armies to attack the Jin Kingdom at the same time. Although the Jin Kingdom had many soldiers who were good at fighting, they were at their weakest after the internal chaos. It was really hard to say who would win. It's not as bad as you think. Tajkis raised the corner of her mouth, revealing a bright smile. Chapter 16-19. Tajkis took a secret report from the laundry yard and handed it to him. Although Han Xingzhou is the nominal head of the hundreds of officials, some of his policies have offended the Jianshan Academy a few years ago, so the officials in this faction don't like him. In addition, people like Jia Shidao, Sherm Yuan, and Shuiji have never been on his side, so he can't mobilize many officials. Song Qingshu took the secret report and read it. His expression suddenly became very interesting, because it recorded Han Xingzhou's recent setbacks. Han Xingzhou wanted to appoint Shuiji, the commander of Guang province, to lead the Huaishi army at the front line, but Shuiji didn't seem to accept the appointment. He also ordered Su Jiji, the Privy Council secretary, to guard Jinling, but Su Jiji also didn't go out. He also transferred Xiaoming to Jianghuai Proclamation Commissioner, but Xiaoming refused. Even through the paper, Song Qingshu could feel Han Xingzhou's embarrassment and rage, but he couldn't do anything about it. The officials in the Southern Song dynasty were good at playing word games. They could always find some random reason to refuse, and, at the same time, they could make it impossible to deal with them. Even if he was demoted, it wasn't a big deal because someone in the court could be used again soon. Moreover, with his previous experience, he could gain great fame, which would be very helpful for his future promotion. Xiaoming. This person seems a little familiar. Song Qing-shu couldn't help but say to himself, but he forgot where he had heard his name. Tajkis, who was beside him, explained considerately. Qiuming serves in the Privy Council, and his official position is the Privy Council Secretary. His son, Qiu Tongfu, married the second daughter of Lu Wendi, the governor of Xiangyang, so he should be an official in Jia Shidao's faction. This didn't surprise Song Qing-shu. These officials who pretended to obey Han Xingzhou, but opposed him in secret, all had the shadow of Jia Shidao behind them. Now, he was curious about something else. Second son-in-law. Who did Lu Wendi's eldest daughter marry? His eldest daughter married Fan Wenhu, good for nothing, Tajkis answered without hesitation. Fan Wenhu? Song Qing-shu had a strange look on his face. He had a very deep impression of this person. During the Southern Song dynasty, he led the Southern Song Navy and almost lost the entire army to the Mongols. After surrendering to the Mongols, he was chosen as the commander-in-chief of the Eastern expedition against Japan. As a result, hundreds of thousands of Mongolian Navy soldiers were buried in a hurricane. What he couldn't figure out the most was why he, who had the halo of total annihilation, was put in such an important position in the Southern Song dynasty and then in the Mongolian dynasty. Tajtish was obviously unable to guess his thoughts as she continued to explain. At present, the Southern Song dynasty can be said to be lacking in generals. Zhao Go has even issued an edict to recommend generals from both inside and outside the imperial court to defend the borders. Because Deng Yulong had once been here as a diplomatic envoy, upon his return, he catered to Zhao Go's liking by claiming that the Jin kingdom was weak internally and advocated for a northern expedition. He was immediately conferred the title of commanding officer of the two Huai provinces. From this, it can be seen that the Southern Song dynasty is lacking in generals. Seeing that Tajtish was able to recite these intelligence reports with ease, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, "Dragon King, you've really impressed me. Even a wily old fox in the political arena wouldn't be able to understand all the intelligence reports as well as you do. It seems that you've read a lot of memorials and reports from all over the country these days. You've really worked hard. There's nothing we can do about it. Originally, I stayed by your side because I wanted you to help restrain the Mongols and lessen the pressure on the Persian headquarters. But who knew that as soon as you took the throne, before you could restrain the Mongols, the Southern Song dynasty would start a northern expedition. Only by solving the internal and external problems as soon as possible can we help the headquarters." Tajtish couldn't help but think of her daughter, Xiao Zhao, and wonder how she was doing. At this moment, amidst a lush mountain range thousands of miles away, on top of the most dangerous cliff was a majestic and sturdy fortress. That was the Persian headquarters of the Ming dynasty. At this moment, in a secret chamber in the deepest part of the headquarters, a group of masked men in black were trembling with fear as they knelt on the ground. In front of them stood a young lady with her back facing them. Although it was only her back view, her figure was graceful and alluring. The exposed skin on her neck was sparkling and translucent like jade. "Did you fail again?" The young lady's voice was soft and clear. When she turned around, one could see her slender eyebrows, straight nose, small cherry lips, and faint dimples on her cheeks. She was indeed incomparably beautiful. If Song Qing-shu was here, he would have noticed that her skin was strangely fair and her eyes were faintly tinged with the blue of the ocean. Compared to the women in the Central Plains, she was a different level of beauty. She could be said to have bright eyes and white teeth, with a peachy smile. Although she was young, she was as beautiful as a lotus flower in the morning dew. However, the group of men in black who were kneeling on the ground were not in the mood to appreciate the beauty of the young lady in front of them. Even the faint smile on her cheeks was like the scythe of the Grim Reaper in their eyes. Temujin has many experts by his side, and he also has thousands of troops protecting him. That imperial tutor Basiba is especially close to him. Basiba is a man with godly skills. Who knows how many of our top assassins have fallen by his hands? The leader of the men in black quickly explained. But this time the plan was so detailed. The 12 precious tree kings were sent to stall Basiba and the other grandmasters. Then, you assassins sent your top elites to kill your way into the king's tent. Why is Temujin unharmed? On the contrary, the people you sent are all missing. Could it be that they chose to betray us? The young lady's voice was as cold as ice. Seeing the group of people below her trembling in fear of her, she herself was in a trance. If her young master saw her now, he probably wouldn't dare to recognize her. This young lady was naturally Xiao Zhao, who had been invited back to the Persian headquarters. Due to the pressure from the powerful Mongols and the power struggles of the Persian Ming dynasty, a young girl like her had become the leader of the headquarters. Because of her lack of experience and her young age, Xiao Zhao could only be considered a puppet leader at the beginning. However, as the war with the Mongols became more and more desperate, and a large number of the Persian Ming dynasty's upper echelons died in battle, coupled with the fact that Xiao Zhao gradually displayed her extraordinary abilities, she gradually became the true leader of the headquarters. After the baptism of blood and fire, the soft and adorable girl of the past had now become a decisive woman. In order to survive, in order to sit firmly in the position of leader, she could only hide the weakness in her bones deep in her heart. The assassins of Assassin will never betray us. The leader of the men in black hurriedly explained. There was an indelible pride in his expression. There are only assassins who fail and die. There are no assassins who surrender. Xiao Zhao frowned. In fact, she didn't believe that the assassins would betray them. However, a group of top assassins entering the king's tent and then disappearing without a trace was truly strange. If I'm not wrong, I'm afraid those people are already dead. The leader of the men in black said in a low voice. Xiao Zhao snorted. I have reliable information. At that time, all the experts by Temujin's side had been transferred away. At that time, Temujin was the only one left in the king's tent. Don't tell me that a group of ace assassins who can easily assassinate the lords of the Western countries all died in Temujin's hands. Chapter 16:20. Although Temujin was invincible on the battlefield, I've never heard of him being a peerless master. Xiao Zhao fell into deep thought. However, her experience in the Central Plains had taught her that there was nothing impossible in this world. After all, she had witnessed with her own eyes the Qian Kuan grand shift that the most talented sect masters had to practice for decades to achieve. Yet the young master had mastered it in just half a day. From then on, she began to believe in the word miracles. Sect master, our sect has been losing again and again. We've organized more than 1,000 assassins to assassinate Temujin, but all of them have ended in failure. The sect has suffered heavy losses. At this point, we can only ask for the help of the old man of the mountain, the leader in black said tentatively. As soon as he said this, the temperature in the room seemed to drop by a few degrees. The old man of the mountain was a taboo. Assassins were divided into second-rate, first-rate, top-rate, and ace assassins. There were even people who made a ranking list of assassins. Because of the high risk of this profession, the top 10 often changed names, and the fight for the first place was even more intense. But no matter how many people fought for the title of the world's #1 assassin, everyone knew in their hearts that there was still one person above them. No, there was still a god. That was the king of assassins that had been recognized for hundreds of years, the old man of the mountain, Huashan. Decades ago, the entire West trembled at this name, because no matter if it was the lord of a small country or the ruler of a large country, as long as they were targeted by him, they would definitely die. The Western countries sent out countless armies and masters to capture him, but they all returned in failure and instead suffered heavy casualties. In the end, the Western countries had no choice but to offer a sky-high reward for his head, but everyone knew that it was a joke. Which assassin would dare to assassinate the king of assassins? The bounty listed by the various countries was just a fig leaf to show that they had not given up yet. After a few more years, Huashan no longer personally took action. Instead, he specially trained a group of assassins, which was the assassin sect that the Western world was terrified of. These assassins were all skilled and would do anything to achieve their goals. They took the heads of the governors of the Western countries one after another. Huashan, on the other hand, gradually disappeared behind the scenes, causing some of the younger people to forget about his existence. The old man from the mountain. Xiao Zhao shook her head. Elder Hua is our final trump card. We can't bother him until the last moment. Hua Shan was highly respected in the Ming dynasty. Although he was an elder in name, he was more respected than the cult leader most of the time. Xiao Zhao was not even sure if she could invite him. After all, she was able to ascend to the position of the cult leader largely because he had secretly opposed the opinions of the masses. But we're already at the last step. About a year ago, they had managed to seriously injure the Mongolian commander-in-chief Zulwu, and the Mongolian offensive had indeed weakened significantly. But before they could rejoice for long, Temujin suddenly came with an even stronger army. Like a hot knife through butter, they broke through the defense of the mountains. If not for the Ming dynasty of the Central Plains, the Hui tribe, and the Western principalities, the Mongolian army would have already broken through the vulture's nest. Even so, the vulture's headquarters was in imminent danger. Who knew how much longer they could hold out? Even the most optimistic person knew that they could at most hold out for another year or two. If they were unlucky, they might not even last for a year. Don't worry. I just received a secret message from my mother. Her plan in the Jin Kingdom is about to succeed. Soon, she will be able to help us attack the Mongolian rear. Thinking of her mother, Xiao Zhao's eyes finally revealed a trace of the girl from before. The Dragon King's side has succeeded. Hope flashed in the eyes of the people kneeling below. Everyone looked excited. Good. We will persevere and defeat the Mongolians. Wisdom King, please protect me. Wisdom King. The fighting spirit of the group was reignited. Unfortunately, Persia was thousands of miles away from the Central Plains. There would be a delay of several months or even half a year for information to be sent back and forth. They did not know that Tajkis was having a headache dealing with the Southern Song dynasty's northern expedition and was unable to attack the Mongolians in Daxing Manor, thousands of miles away. Tajkis gave Song Qingshu a brief introduction of the current situation. She then said, I'll take you to the palace. We can discuss what to do next. Besides, Goodbye and Wan Yinping have been missing you. Song Qingshu moved closer to her and chuckled. Did the Dragon King miss me? Miss you, my ass. Tajkis was also very depressed. When she was the purple-robed Dragon King, in the entire Brightness Peak, no one in the Ming dynasty dared to show her any disrespect, let alone flirt with her. Later on, when she traveled to Jianghu, it was not that she did not run into any fools, but she immediately made sure that they would not live to see the sun the next day. But now, she was being flirted with in all kinds of ways by a younger man, yet she could not do anything about it. This kind of feeling made her feel suffocated. But Song Qingshu did not care so much. He naturally put his arm around her soft waist and pulled half of her body into his arms. Tajkis rested her forehead on one hand. She used to be a famous cold and beautiful demoness in the Jianghu, but now she seemed to be her exclusive property. Fortunately, she was not a brainless person with big breasts. She quickly thought of a solution and coldly said, I'm going out now. Do you want the guards outside to see Tang Kuo-Bien and a man hugging each other so intimately? As she spoke, she put on Tang Kuo-Bien's mask again and deliberately used the beard on the mask to poke the other's cheek. Seeing that the cold and beautiful purple-robed Dragon King had turned into a bearded man in an instant, Song Qingshu felt a chill run down his spine. As expected, he subconsciously let go of his hand and even took a few steps back to put enough distance between them. Seeing the other party's somewhat troubled expression, the purple-robed Dragon King under the mask revealed a happy smile. Then, she waved her hand and said, Let's go. I'll take you to the palace. Hearing that her voice had also become rough, Song Qingshu shuddered and hurriedly expelled some of the images from his mind, lest he would be traumatized by them in the future. With a flash, he directly appeared in front of the purple-robed Dragon King. Taking off her mask, Song Qingshu gloomily said, Since I'm back, I'll pretend to be Tang Kuo-Bien. Wearing this mask to cover your peerless beauty is truly a waste of God's gift. Although she had heard countless people praising her beauty, when she received Song Qingshu's approval, The corners of Tajkis's mouth slightly curled up into a beautiful smile. Unfortunately, before she could finish her happiness, she heard Song Qingshu's next words. Take off your clothes. What do you mean? Tajkis subconsciously covered her collar and looked at him warily. Although the two of them had intimate contact, she was still a cold and beautiful woman deep down. Moreover, they had been separated for several months. She had tried her best to forget everything that had happened between them. I'm just asking you to replace Tang Quobian's clothes with mine. Seeing her intense reaction, Song Qingshu was instantly displeased. Besides, you are my woman. If I ask you to take off your clothes, just do it. There's no need for you to ask so many questions. Tajkis coldly replied, I'm not your woman. I'm just, you promised to help the Persian Ming dynasty to deal with the Mongols. That's why I'm staying by your side. But from the looks of it, there's no sign of you fulfilling your promise. The Mongols were like the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. Song Qingshu's heart turned heavy as well. It's just that I can't free my hand right now. Don't worry, I'm even more anxious to deal with the Mongols than you are. Recalling the steppe empire that swept through everything in history, Song Qingshu felt the pressure mounting. Chapter 16:21. Upon hearing her words, Song Qingshu turned around and said in a flat tone, Dragon King, you probably don't understand your current situation. What right do you have to negotiate with me? Tadish was momentarily at a loss for words, but she reacted quickly and replied, Is it possible for me to pretend to be Tangqua and help you deal with so many government affairs? Song Qingshu was stunned. Indeed, Tadish, who had lost all her trump cards, didn't have the capital to negotiate with him. But now that she had accomplished her mission in Tang Quobian's position, she had sufficiently proven her worth. This put him in a difficult position. You did a good job, but it's not irreplaceable. If worst comes to worst, I'll let Wan Yinping take your place. Song Qingshu snorted. He had to suppress this woman's arrogance, or else she would become cocky. You can indeed find someone to replace me, but that will waste several months of your time, and what you lack the most is time. Moreover, this is a crucial time for the Southern Song dynasty's northern expedition. Are you willing to take the risk? Tadish was not to be outdone. Don't forget that you've been poisoned by me. Your life is in my hands at any moment. Reminded Song Qingshu. At the same time, he secretly wondered if her courage and vision had improved after being the #1 expert of the Jin Kingdom for so long. You won't kill me. Tadish stood there gracefully without the slightest bit of concern. Song Qingshu was stunned. Where does this mysterious confidence of yours come from? Because you are a lecher. A blush flashed across Tadish's beautiful and indescribable face. You're very confident in your looks, sneered Song Qingshu. Tadish didn't answer and just glanced at him. The former #1 beauty of the martial arts world was undoubtedly confident in her looks. I don't deny that I'm fond of beauties or that I'm soft-hearted, but when it's time to kill, I'm never careless. Song Qingshu said emotionlessly. The temperature in the room instantly dropped by several degrees. Tadish's heart skipped a beat. Because of the opponent's aura, she felt like a small boat on a turbulent sea, and even breathing was a little difficult. At the same time, the resentful souls of Wan Yin Liang, Changshan King, and the others seemed to be flying around and whispering in her ears from time to time, sending chills all over her body as if her soul had been frozen. After all, we've been cooperating happily. Do you really have to say such things to hurt our relationship? Although Tajtish had always been blunt with men, that was only because she did not think it was necessary. When she thought it was necessary, back into Xing Mansion, under the name of Lady Peach Blossom, she had bewitched countless princes and grandsons who worshipped under her skirt. Hearing her suddenly speaking to him in a resentful and reproachful tone, Song Qingshu couldn't help but be startled. But soon after, he smiled and said, That's right. The Dragon King is not a little girl who hasn't seen the world. I'm the one who has fallen behind. Can I change my clothes now? Tadish had just heaved a sigh of relief when she heard the first half of his sentence, but her smile instantly froze when she heard the latter half. She was also very depressed. After such a long time, he had come back to the same topic. Just as she was at a loss of what to do, Song Qingshu turned his head and said, "You can change your clothes. I won't peep." Seeing that he had suddenly become so gentlemanly, a complicated look flashed across Tadish's face. Eventually, she silently walked to the side, opened a wardrobe, and took out a dress. Because she often disguised herself, she had specially prepared a few spare clothes in the study. After a moment of rustling, Tadish walked over with a slightly flushed face. "I'm done. I'll go find you a set of Tang Quobien's clothes." Just now, she had been worried that he would peep at her and had been vigilantly watching his back. But who knew that he hadn't turned his head at all? She rejoiced, but at the same time, she secretly blamed herself for her unnecessary action. Given his temperament, if he really wanted to peep at her, why would he do it in secret? There's no need to find another one. The one you were wearing just now is good enough. Song Qingshu smiled. Tadish's heart skipped a beat. She hurriedly said, "But..." As a result, the other party directly grabbed the clothes she had just taken off and put them on in the blink of an eye. "It smells pretty good." Song Qingshu took a sniff and commented with a serious expression. Tadish glared at him. "How can you wear women's clothes? Aren't you afraid of bad luck?" This was a taboo in ancient times. Otherwise, Zhuge Liang wouldn't have brought a woman's clothes to Sima Yi's front line to provoke him, infuriating the Chao Wei soldiers to the point where they wanted to fight. Song Qingshu shook his head. "I'm not particular about such things. A woman's fragrant clothes smell much better than a man's. Besides, this is Tang Quobien's clothes." Then he suddenly changed the topic. "But you really have to be careful in the future. Since you're pretending to be Tang Quobien, don't sprinkle any fragrant powder on your body. Otherwise, an observant person might really be able to see through your disguise." I understand." Tadish felt gloomy. She was obviously the one who was taken advantage of. Why did she end up being scolded instead? Suddenly, she was startled. Why was she so easily at a loss like a little girl in front of him? At this moment, Song Qingshu had already changed his clothes and put on his mask. He directly opened the door and walked out. At the same time, he beckoned to her. Tadish blushed and hurriedly followed him. "Hey, wasn't my lord the only one in the room just now? Where did that purple-robed woman come from? You don't even recognize her. She's the widow of the Changshan king, Madame Peach Blossom. She was once the most beautiful woman in the capital. I heard that even His Majesty was infatuated with her. Who would have thought that my lord would have such a good time? My lord dares to touch a woman that His Majesty likes. That's why the two of them were sneaking around. I reckon that they built a tunnel to enter and exit my lord's study. That's why you don't know how she got in." "I see. Our my lord is truly blessed with women. He has the #1 beauty of the Jin Kingdom as his wife, and the peerlessly beautiful Madame Peach Blossom as his lover. TSK. Lower your voice. Are you tired of living?" When they came out of the study, the guards outside looked at Tadish in astonishment. After all, there was clearly no one else in the study. If not for the fact that they knew of the relationship between Tadish and their my lord, they might have thought that there was an assassin. Even though the guards had intentionally lowered their voices, Song Qingshu and Tajtish were experts with sharp ears and eyes. They heard every word of their conversation clearly. Hearing these people privately ridiculing her, a trace of frost appeared on Tadish's cold and elegant face. Just as she was about to flare up, Song Qingshu grabbed her and said, "Enough. Entering the palace is more important." Tadish's face was gloomy. After exiting the residence, she hatefully said, "This bunch of gossipy bastards. When I return, I will send them to the front lines and have them fight against the Song people." These people were usually extremely respectful in front of her, not even daring to breathe loudly. Now that she was being ridiculed by them after changing her attire, how could the cold and arrogant Tadish endure it? Song Qingshu, on the other hand, was full of smiles. They are men, after all. What we talk about is wine and women. It isn't easy to train these trusted aides. For my sake, don't bother with them. Chapter 16:22. A horse carriage was already waiting for them in front of the gate. After boarding the carriage, Song Qingshu curiously asked, "Where are Ouyang Feng and Xiu Qianren? Why haven't I seen them this time?" Qiu Qianren, is currently the commander of the Imperial Guards in the palace. As for Ouyang Feng, he seems to be researching some new poison and has gone off to gather herbs. At the mention of Ouyang Feng, a trace of fear flashed through Tadish's eyes. Song Qingshu also felt a little apprehensive. Even though he was now immune to poison, how could a new poison developed by Western poison be ordinary? During the rest of the journey, Song Qingshu was no longer as aggressive as before. He did not even make any physical contact with Tadish. Tadish could not help but have a good impression of him. At the same time, she was furious at herself for being useless. How could she have a good impression of him just like that? Right? Is there any news of Xiao Zhao? Song Qingshu suddenly asked. Tadish awoke from her deep thoughts and shook her head slightly. The two places are separated by tens of thousands of li. Moreover, the other side is currently in the midst of war. How can accurate news be transmitted here? I used the intelligence network of the laundry brothel and learned that the Mongolians have won many battles recently. I'm afraid that the situation at their headquarters is not good. The Mongolians are currently at their peak. I'm afraid that no army is a match for them in a direct confrontation. Song Qingshu's heart was extremely heavy. One day, he would have to face this terrifying enemy. At that time, how would he be able to defeat the Mongolian cavalry that dominated the world? With the experience of his previous life, Song Qingshu knew that only by defeating the enemy in a field battle would he be able to grasp the initiative in the war. If he could not win in a field battle, he would have to fortify his defenses and take a beating. That way, no matter how large his army was, it would be easy for it to collapse. The Ming dynasty was unable to defeat the Manchurian Qing in a field battle and was eventually destroyed by internal and external aggression. The Southern Song dynasty was also dragged into economic ruin by the Mongolians, and in the end, the last drop of blood flowed from the cliff. The advancement of firearms in history had caused the cavalry to completely retreat from the stage. However, firearms were still in their infancy in this era. There were no crossbows yet, so it was unrealistic to use firearms against the Mongolians. Right? I recently received a report. It seems that the main altar had organized an unprecedentedly tight assassination attempt. However, in the end, Temujin was still safe and sound, Tadish suddenly said. Song Qingshu frowned. As far as I know, the headquarters of the Ming dynasty has organized countless assassination attempts against Temujin. There are many skilled fighters in the headquarters, not to mention the assassin faction, which is an expert in assassination. It's understandable that they have not succeeded even once. But why hasn't Temujin even been injured? Tadish was startled as well. You mean? Looks like Temujin is also a super expert. Song Qingshu's thoughts raced like lightning. If he could capture the leader first and deal with Temujin, then he might be able to get rid of Temujin. Based on the history of Mongolian infighting, he might actually be able to get rid of this thorn that had been plaguing him for a long time. But he also knew that just the Ryong Palace alone was already filled with experts and had almost conquered the entire martial arts world of the Central Plains. As the Khan, Temujin would only have even more experts by his side. Furthermore, he had thousands of soldiers and horses protecting him at all times. Furthermore, he himself was an unfathomable super expert. How could it be easy to capture the leader first? Qingshu, can you promise me that you will deal with the Mongols as soon as possible? Tadish suddenly pleaded. Her voice was unprecedentedly weak. In fact, she did not care much about the survival of the Persian Ming dynasty. The only thing she cared about was the safety of her daughter, Xiao Zhao. However, after being the #1 official of the Jin Kingdom for such a long time, she had thoroughly tasted the wonders of power. Suddenly, she felt reluctant to part with the Persian Ming dynasty. After all, this was their political capital. If the Persian Ming dynasty were to be destroyed by the Mongols, the mother and daughter would no longer have anything to rely on. They would also have no capital to negotiate with others. With their stunning beauty, they would only bring about endless disasters in this chaotic world. Don't worry, the Mongols have always been my #1 enemy. Song Qingshu nodded his head and replied in a deep voice. Tadish nodded her head. She understood the current situation of the Jin Kingdom and knew that urging them would be of no use. The only thing they could do now was to solve the problem at hand. Just like that, the two of them arrived at the imperial palace. Tang Quobian's current power was overwhelming. Many of the guards in the imperial palace were his trusted aides. Therefore, it was as easy for him to enter and exit the imperial palace. Even when he brought a woman with him, no guards dared to question him. After asking the guard on duty, they found out that the emperor was currently in the imperial study, reading through memorials. The two of them then made their way to the imperial study. When they arrived at the outer perimeter of the imperial study, they found that the place was heavily guarded. The two of them were quickly stopped. Song Qingshu frowned. "Even I am stopped." The leader of the guards smiled bitterly. "Please forgive me, Marshal. The emperor has specially decreed that no one is allowed to enter. If Marshal is here, we can send someone to report your arrival." "What is he up to?" Song Qingshu frowned. He waved his hand to signal the leader to go in and report. Tadish pursed her lips into a smile and whispered into his ear, "Women are always fond of beauty. It is uncomfortable to wear a man's face all day long. It is likely that Gu Bai has removed her makeup. To avoid trouble, she is refusing to see anyone." "Oh." Song Qingshu was surprised. Soon, someone ran out and said, "The emperor invites Marshal in." Song Qingshu nodded his head. Just as he was about to bring Tadish in, the guard stretched out his hand to stop her. With a troubled expression, he said, "The emperor has specifically instructed that only Marshal will be allowed in. Please forgive me, Marshal." Song Qingshu finally realized that Gu Bai had removed her mask. Naturally, she cannot be seen by anyone else. Hence, only Tang Quobian was allowed in. Tadish did not mind being stopped. "You go in first. I will just stand here for a while." Having said that, she went to the side to admire the scenery in the garden, leaving behind a beautiful silhouette that attracted the gazes of the surrounding guards from time to time. Song Qingshu could not help but laugh. Be it Purple Road Dragon Queen or Madame Peach Blossom, their charms were indeed capable of turning the world upside down. He did not tarry and followed the palace, made into the imperial study. When they were near the imperial study, the palace maid gestured for them to enter before quietly retreating. Song Qingshu pushed open the door and saw a devastatingly beautiful woman sitting by the desk. Her jade-white hands were gently flipping through the memorials on the table. Her long hair cascaded down like a waterfall. Her skin was as white as snow. The corners of her mouth curled into an elegant smile. Her slightly upturned pink lips resembled fresh flower petals. Her curved eyebrows faintly revealed a hint of faintly discernible charm. Just one look at her would cause one's heart to tremble. There was no lack of seductive women in this world. However, pure seduction and flirtatiousness were somewhat inferior. They could only tempt some vulgar and lustful men. On the other hand, some women had a dignified and graceful temperament. They gave off an inviolable feeling of holiness. Occasionally, they would reveal a hint of charm. That was the most fatal temptation to men. Even immortals could not help but be tempted by them. Obviously, Goodbye belonged to the latter group. This was also why she was publicly recognized as the #1 beauty of the Jin Kingdom. Chapter 16:23. Hearing the commotion at the door, Goodbye raised her head. "Tish, weren't you supposed to be dealing with the news from the south? Why have you suddenly come to the palace?" She slowly got up, and an extremely ordinary movement outlined the contours of her body that made people's hearts sway. Song Qingshu was startled. He realized that the other party did not recognize him due to his disguise. He did not reveal his identity. "Isn't it because I miss Madam?" Looking at the familiar face before her, Goodbye's eyes flashed with a trace of confusion. She could not help but recall the days when she and her husband were lovey-dovey. Back then, he seemed to have often called her that. However, she quickly remembered that her husband had passed away. Her heart ached as she glared at the other party with an unfriendly expression. Tish, is it funny to play such a joke?" Seeing her pained expression, Song Qingshu sighed inwardly. He felt even more pity for her. He walked over to support her. "I was worried that Madam would be lonely, so I came to console her." Goodbye, on the other hand, frowned. War is about to break out at any moment. With so many official duties on hand, you still have the mood to play such a joke? She suddenly thought of something. Especially at such a close distance, the other party gave her a completely different feeling from Taj Tish. She could not help but feel a chill down her spine. No, this isn't Taj Tish's personality. Who are you? I am your man. Seeing the other party hurriedly retreating, Song Qingshu reached out and pulled her into his embrace. Goodbye, on the other hand, was frightened out of her wits. She hurriedly opened her mouth and shouted, "Come." Unfortunately, just as she was about to call for the guards outside, her moist red lips were sealed by the other party's mouth. Her words could only be uttered in a low whimper. Goodbye was so frightened that she struggled with all her might. Her delicate fists continuously hammered the man's chest. Unfortunately, her weak strength was of no use. Thinking that she was about to be defiled, 2 streams of tears uncontrollably rolled down her cheeks. This caused Song Qingshu to panic. He hurriedly tore off his mask and said, "Madam, it's me." Looking at the appearance of the man in front of her, Goodbye was stunned at first. Then, a red line that could be seen with the naked eye rose from her neck to her cheeks. "You be **starred. You're deliberately teasing me." Although Goodbye is as gentle as water, her voice is still so gentle and pleasant. Song Qingshu lets her punch him to vent her anger. After that, he smiles bitterly and apologizes. "I didn't tease you. Didn't you say that I'm your man as soon as I came in?" Goodbye spat. "I thought it was Tajkiss." Looking at her shy look when she was angry, Song Qingshu couldn't help kissing her again. Goodbye's body stiffened, but she soon softened. After a long while, their lips parted. Goodbye lay in Song Qingshu's embrace. Her body seemed to melt. Her red lips shone with a moist luster. "Your current appearance. I can't help but feel a sense of guilt. I feel sorry for Tang Kuo-bien." Hearing her words, Song Qingshu almost couldn't restrain himself from doing her on the spot. However, he knows that business is more important. Moreover, Tajkiss is still waiting outside. After comforting her, he said, "This time, Tajkiss and I entered the palace together to discuss our next strategy." Earlier, she was stopped by the Imperial Guards. Hearing that Tajkiss was outside, Goodbye hurriedly stood up and tidied up her messy clothes and hair. Then, she said, "I'll send someone to bring her in. Also inform Pinger. She will be very happy to know that you've returned." Thinking of the charming young lady who addressed him as brother-in-law, Song Qingshu couldn't help but feel a trace of tenderness in his heart. Back then, in order to obtain the antidote for the Wudong bandits, he used Tang Kuo-bien's appearance to coax and trick her into giving her body. Now, he felt even more sorry for her. Soon, Tajkiss entered. Goodbye smiled and said, "This is my mistake. In the past, you always appeared as Tang Kuo-bien, so the Imperial Guards didn't stop you. It seems that in the future, I'll have to ask the Imperial Guards to let you pass when they see your real face. In any case, Tajkiss, you are so beautiful that the Imperial Guards won't forget you after seeing you once." Tajkiss was waiting impatiently outside. Upon hearing Goodbye's gentle voice, a trace of a smile finally appeared on her cold and elegant face. "Before the number 1 beauty of Jin Kingdom, how could I dare to call myself beautiful?" At the side, Song Qingshu unhappily said, "Since we're so familiar with each other, let's not flatter each other. Let's talk business." The 2 ladies simultaneously blushed and hastily moved a stool to the side of the desk. At the same time, they found a map of the 2 kingdoms and spread it out. At this moment, a surprise voice came from the door. "Brother-in-law." Following that, a black figure quickly ran in and jumped into Song Qingshu's embrace. Song Qingshu embraced the young lady's youthful and slender waist. He couldn't help but smile. "Long time no see. Ping has become more and more beautiful." The person who came was naturally Wanyan Ping. When she heard that Song Qingshu had returned, she immediately dropped what she was doing and dashed straight into his embrace. After her excitement, she realized that there was someone else beside her. She couldn't help but blush. She hastily released her legs from his waist and wrapped her hands around his neck, standing there awkwardly. Today, Wang Yinping was dressed in black, which wrapped around her youthful body, making her look even more exquisite and alluring. Beside her, Gubai saw the hint of bashfulness on her face and couldn't help but feel warmth in his heart. His sister was in charge of the gloomy place in the laundry yard. Her entire temperament had become somewhat dark. Fortunately, Song Qing-shu had appeared and restored her youthful smile. "Brother-in-law, can you put on a mask? I'm not used to seeing you like this," Wang Yinping suddenly said shyly. Song Qing-shu was speechless. Sometimes, he really felt that he was only a substitute for tranquil. If he were to suddenly resurrect, this last would leave him in a matter of minutes. Beside him, Gubai's eyes flickered. She softly said, "We are after all in the palace. If someone were to see us, it would be easy for them to slip up. You should put on a mask." She then looked at him expectantly. Fine. I'll put it on." Although Song Qing-shu appeared somewhat gloomy, he actually wasn't against this kind of role-playing game. In fact, he even felt that it was somewhat exciting. Thinking of this, he even felt that he was a little bit perverted. Witnessing all this, Tadish had a strange expression on her face. She thought to herself, these two sisters are really something. Clearly, they have already done what should and shouldn't have happened with Song Qing-shu. Yet, they just can't get over it and insist that he appear as Tang Kuobian. Are they not having an affair this way? Or do they feel less guilty? Is this really going to work? Tadish suddenly wondered if she should let Song Qing-shu disguise himself as Han Qinya in the future. Once she imagined that scene, she shook her head in disgust. Just as this thought rose up, she immediately extinguished it. By this time, Song Qing-shu had already put on his mask again. The three of them finally began discussing how to deal with the current tense situation. Chapter 16:24. Don't worry about the Redcoat Army. When the time comes, I will think of a way to use Liao to delay them and prevent them from participating in the Southern Song's northern expedition. Song Qing-shu replied, "The most troublesome thing is Western Shu. The Jin were stronger than the Southern Song, but the Southern Song had a stronger economy. If the Southern Song attacked from 3 fronts at the same time, the Jin would not be able to attend to one and lose sight of the other, especially since Western Shu was a direct threat to the Guangzhou area. If the Western Front failed, the entire Guangzhou area would be in danger and the foundation of the country would be shaken. Didn't the Mongols just hand over Western Shu to the Southern Song? In just a few months, they have reorganized and are ready for the northern expedition." This was the most unbelievable thing to Song Qing-shu. Wang Yinping explained, although Western Shu has been through war for a long time, it is still a prosperous country with a strong foundation. Moreover, this time the Southern Song court has spent a great deal of effort to inject blood into the Western Shu. Regardless of money or supplies, they have given them whatever they need. Moreover, the military leader of Western Shu, Wu Shi, is a rare talent. In just a few months, he has trained the Western Shu army to be strong. Originally, he was only stationed in Xing province and commanded the imperial army. Later, he was appointed as the assistant proclamation commissioner of Sichuan. At the same time, he will continue to command the Western Shu army. Song Qing-shu was astonished. It should be known that only those who were in charge of the government were qualified to hold the position of proclamation envoy and vice proclamation envoy. How old was Wu Shi now? How could he become the vice proclamation envoy? In this chaotic world, being the number 1 in the military and number 2 in the government was more common than being a proclamation commissioner. In a sense, he was the number 1 person in Western Shu. As for the nominal proclamation commissioner, Chung Song, he was only there to represent the imperial court. Not only that, Tajkis added, according to the Song tradition, the imperial princes have always been in charge of the finances of Shu. The relevant documents are handed over to the proclamation commissioner. This makes the proclamation commissioner and the proclamation commissioner equal in power. The finances of Han Xian belong to the proclamation commissioner, and the assistant proclamation commissioner can control and inspect them. Today, Wu Shi can be said to be in control of the military, government, and finances of Western Shu. It is truly a country within a country. I've just received news that the imperial court has appointed Wu Shi as the governor of Shaanxi and Hudong. Wu Shi can be said to be very popular now. Gobai muttered to herself in confusion. I don't know why Han Xingzhou trusts him so much. Isn't he afraid that he might have other thoughts? Song Qingshu was clear that with Ling Hu Chang's character, how could he possibly have any disloyalty? Han Xingzhou did this because he was afraid that the people of Jia Shidao's group would secretly hinder Wu Shi and effect his northern expedition. It seemed that he was determined to win this northern expedition, and in a sense, he was putting all his eggs in one basket. After all, he had made an exception to promote so many of his trusted subordinates, which must have affected the interests of a large number of people. If he succeeded in the northern expedition, it would be fine. If he failed, what awaited him was probably a bottomless abyss. The imperial court has just gone through a civil war, and it hasn't recovered yet. I'm afraid that it can only deal with the two attacks from the south. The morale of West Shu is high. If they send troops, I'm afraid that Guanzhong will be in danger. Tajdish had been serving as the Minister of Defense of the Tang dynasty for a long time, so she knew the current situation of the Jin Kingdom very well. She couldn't help but sound a little worried. She wasn't worried about the Jin Kingdom, but worried that they wouldn't be able to deal with the Mongols if they failed. Now that the southern Song dynasty has taken back Sichuan, it's already bordered by Tubo and Xixia. Why don't we use these two countries to see if we can control Sichuan? Gobai suddenly suggested. Wan Yinping shook her head and said, according to the intelligence of the laundry yard, the Tubo kingdom is now in chaos. The imperial power and the religious power are fighting for the actual rule of the country, so they have no time to use troops. Moreover, the southern Song dynasty and the Tubo kingdom are connected by marriage. Back then, the princess of Jinsheng married into the Tubo kingdom, so they have the strength to help the Song dynasty attack us. In history, because the southern Song dynasty lost the north, the ideology of the Confucian ethical code prevailed. Coupled with the shame of Jinkong, countless women of the royal family were kidnapped back to the laundry yard in the north. Therefore, the topic of connected marriage was a taboo in the Song dynasty. They believed that it was a great humiliation. If anyone dared to propose a connected marriage, they would definitely be drowned by the spittle of the civil and military officials. On the contrary, the more powerful Han and Tang dynasty didn't mind the idea of a connected marriage at all. This was because they were connected by marriage with the attitude of the strong. They weren't offering their daughters for glory. Although they sacrificed the happiness of a woman, it saved countless soldiers from dying on the battlefield. Indirectly, it saved even more women from the pain of losing their husbands. Therefore, different people's attitudes towards connected marriage were completely different. However, for some unknown reason, the Song dynasty actually sent a princess to marry into the Tubo kingdom. Hearing Wan Yinping mentioning the princess of Jinsheng, Song Qingshu couldn't help but think of the time when he went to the Tubo kingdom to learn the joyful Zen. It seemed that he had met her on the road. But at that time, she was in the carriage and he didn't see her face clearly. Wan Yinping's words quickly pulled him back to reality. Song Qingshu knew that now was not the time to let his imagination run wild. He hurriedly listened to her and said, as for the Western Xia dynasty, we received information that they intend to have a connected marriage with the Liao kingdom. The candidate is Princess Cheng, and the daughter of Liao's powerful Yeluisin. Originally, the Western Xia dynasty and the Liao kingdom would definitely not help us after the connected marriage. But recently, Yeluisin was killed in a rebellion, which made the marriage between the two countries more variable. We could try to start from this aspect. Song Qingshu felt a headache and said, how to start? We can't also send a princess to the Western Xia dynasty, can we? Now, you're the only princess of the right age in the country. Bah! Gobai suddenly became angry. You can't have any ideas about paying her. Song Qingshu gave a wry smile and said, don't worry. Even if she's willing to marry me, I'm not willing to let her marry me. That would be for the best. Gobai snorted, and only then did his expression soften. Looking at Song Qingshu's deflated look, Tajkis couldn't help but have a somewhat complicated look on her face. Compared to a flower in a greenhouse like Goodbye, who was born in Jianghu, she knew more about Song Qingshu's current power. If any man had such unparalleled kung fu and great power as he did, only women would tremble in front of him. How could they have the luck to bully him? This man is really different from other men in this world. Although he sometimes deliberately pretends to be fierce, he can't hide the gentleness in his bones. He seems to really treat women as equals. Tajkis thought absent-mindedly. Has the Dragon King thought of something? Inadvertently noticing his dazed look, Song Qingshu asked curiously. Tajkis came back to her senses, and a blush flashed across her face. I did think of an idea, but I don't know if it will work. What idea? The other three looked at her curiously. Chapter 16:25. Hearing Tajkis's proposal, Goodbye frowned slightly. It's a good idea, but it's difficult to realize. First of all, if Liao really wants to send the bride, he will definitely take a detour through Mongolia. How can he go to Western Xia through our territory? If he takes a detour to the north, he won't be able to frame Wu Shi of Sichuan. Since Tajkis had proposed this plan, she had naturally considered the problems involved. She explained unhurriedly, under normal circumstances, he won't pass through here. But now, Qingshu can influence Liao to some extent. Song Qingshu also opened his mouth. Although I can influence Liao's decision, it's obvious that I'm walking into a trap. All the civil and military officials in the court will definitely oppose it. After becoming an emperor, he realized that the emperor could not do whatever he wanted. There were a series of rules that quietly kept him in check. Of course, we won't let Liao's wedding procession go here openly. A cunning light flashed in Tajkis's eyes. Qingshu can send Commandery Princess Cheng and away first. Then, we'll disguise ourselves as Liao's wedding procession and appear at the border of Sichuan. Then, we'll pretend to be kidnapped by the Southern Song Army. Then, we'll announce that the future crown princess of Western Xia has fallen into Wu Shi's hands. Because Liao can't contact Commandery Princess Cheng and doesn't know whether it's true or not, he naturally can't refute it. Her words made everyone's eyes light up. Song Qingshu looked at her in surprise. Dragon King, you've really impressed me. I didn't expect you to be so talented in deceiving people. Tajkis rolled her eyes at him. Are you praising me or insulting me? But Sichuan knows very well that they didn't kidnap Commandery Princess Cheng. What if they stand out and deny it? Goodbye was still a little confused. This time, it was Wan Yinping's turn to explain. Since ancient times, all thieves would say that they were wronged. As the biggest suspects, who would believe them? And in this chaotic time, the ruffians at the bottom like to pretend to be mountain bandits to rob and kill passing rich families. Maybe Wu Shi himself doesn't know whether it was done by the people at the bottom or not. How can he deny it? Goodbye was like a flower in a greenhouse. Since she was young, she hadn't seen much of the dark side. Even though Wan Yinping was still young, but because she was in charge of the laundry yard, she knew more about the dirty things of the lower class. Song Qingshu finally made the decision and said, All right, we'll deal with West Shu this way for the time being. I'll have to trouble Ping, to arrange the details. The laundry yard was the intelligence agency of the Jin Kingdom, so it was easy for them to deal with this kind of thing. At this time, a eunuch suddenly came in and reported, The Princess of Penglai requests an audience. The Princess of Penglai was Wan Yin Chongjia. What is she doing here? The group of people looked at each other, not knowing what she was up to. Goodbye didn't want to see her at first, but she was worried that she had something important to do, so she ordered, invite her in. Then, she put on Wan Yin Rui's mask again. Because Wan Yinping had to make plans, she took the opportunity to return to the laundry yard. Not long after, under the guidance of a eunuch, a beautiful young girl slowly walked in. Her skin was incomparably white and tender, like cream, as if water was about to drip out. Her eyes were flowing, and her elegant eyebrows were slender. Although because of her age, she still hadn't matured. But it could be seen that in the future, she would definitely be a stunning beauty that could cause the downfall of a country. She has completely inherited her mother's beauty and even surpassed her. Song Qing secretly sighed in admiration. Every time he saw Wanyan Zhongjia, he felt a sense of awe. In particular, that youthful and immature look of a young girl was enough to make any man feel pity for her. Zhongjia greets your Imperial Majesty. Wanyan Zhongjia walked in and bowed to go by, then turned to Song Qing and bowed. Greetings, Marshal Du. As he spoke, he secretly winked at him. Song Qing heart skipped a beat. What a little vixen. Even with his current self-control, his mind was almost swayed by her seduction. If she wanted to flirt with some young boys, she would probably be able to attract a large number of young men in the capital to bow down to her with a flick of her finger. Zhongjia, what business have you come to the palace for? Gobai looked at the young woman below the stage dotingly. According to seniority, she was the young woman's aunt. Perhaps it was because the Tranquil family and the Zhongjia family were both in dire straits that they sympathized with each other, but their relationship had been very good over the years. I haven't come to pay my respects to your Imperial Majesty in a long time, so I came to pay my respects to your Imperial Majesty. Wanyan Zhongjia giggled, her eyes like two crescent moons. Even as women, they couldn't help but admit her charm and find it hard to be angry at her. Nonsense, Gobai thought to herself. If you weren't my niece, it would be strange if you didn't get flogged today. You came to the palace for this matter? Wanyan Zhongjia blinked and replied in a deadpan manner. Is paying my respects to your Imperial Majesty not a big deal? Noticing that everyone's expressions had darkened, she said, there's one more thing. My mother wants to invite Uncle to her residence as a guest, so I came to invite Uncle. I hope that Uncle will do me the honor. Tadish, who was standing to the side, frowned. You didn't invite anyone in the past, so why did you have to invite him today? Wanyan Zhongjia pouted. My mother just happened to have a sudden impulse today. What's wrong with this kind of coincidence? Tadish snorted. She couldn't very well say that she suspected that Wanyan Zhongjia was here for Song Qing, so she could only ignore her. Gobai was also somewhat dissatisfied. If you want to invite Uncle, why don't you go to the Commander-in-Chief's residence? Why do you have to come to the palace? She and Song Qing had not seen each other for a long time. Naturally, she didn't want him to be invited away by another woman as soon as he returned. However, with her current identity as Wanyan, there were many things that were inconvenient for her to say. I went to the Commander-in-Chief's residence, but the people there said that Uncle had come to the palace, so I had no choice but to come here, Wanyan Zhongjia said innocently. Couldn't you have waited for him outside the palace? Why did you have to disturb us for this matter? How could Gobai not understand that Wanyan Zhongjia's visit to pay his respects was an excuse? His real purpose was to invite Tranquil to explain. Thinking of her charming and enchanting mother, Gobai couldn't help but frown. Although Pucha Aliho was the most beautiful woman of the previous generation in the Jin Kingdom, her reputation had never been good. It was rumored that she had had ambiguous relationships with many men over the years. As a result, Gobai, who had always been clean and pure, didn't like her very much. If I had waited for him outside the palace, perhaps he wouldn't have left today, Wanyan Zhongjia said meaningfully. At the same time, his gaze swept across Gobai and Tadish's faces, causing their hearts to skip a beat. Could it be that she knows something? Gobai subconsciously looked at Song Qing. When the opportunity arose, she would definitely ask him about it. All right, I'll go with you later. Song Qing knew that something must have happened for Zhongjia to look for him so urgently. Thus, he decided to go and see what exactly was going on. Chapter 16:26. Song Qing was startled. Only then did he recall that he had instructed Tish about this matter. After all, he was the emperor of the Jin Kingdom in name, but in reality, he had to remain in the shadows. It was difficult for him to mobilize the power of the Jin Kingdom, Qing Kingdom, and other countries as he pleased. Influenced by the theory of political power comes from the barrel of a gun in his previous life, he planned to build a new army, an elite of the elites, and an army that would only listen to his orders. However, as this was a matter of poaching the Jin Kingdom's people, it was inappropriate for him to let the Jebi sisters handle it. Therefore, He arranged for Tish to be in charge, with Qiu Qianren assisting from side. Qiu Qianren used to be the leader of a gang. He had built the obscure Iron Palm clan into a famous gang in the Wulian world. His leadership ability was evident. Originally, Song Qingshu planned to let Ouyang Feng watch from the side, but he had no interest in these mundane matters. He was only obsessed with practicing martial arts and researching poisons. I'll ask you about this when I come back. Song Qingshu glanced at Goodbye. He had forgotten about it, because he was busy dealing with the Southern Song Dynasty's northern expedition. Now it was not appropriate to mention it in front of her. Oh, Tadish was rather gloomy. Actually, the reason why she didn't mention this matter was because she planned to use this matter to lure him out of the palace. This was to prevent him from indulging in the tenderness of the Songbi sisters and forgetting about his duties. Of course, it could not be said that she was trying to fight for Song Qingshu's favor. It was just a woman's instinct. After all, if she could get closer to Song Qingshu, it would be beneficial to convince him to send troops to Mongolia as soon as possible. Seeing that he wasn't convinced, Tadish made a final attempt. I do have a list of middle and lower-ranked officers. The crux of the matter is that I haven't found a suitable candidate for the commander of this army. I need you to check on it. Song Qingshu pondered for a moment before replying. All right, I'll keep an eye out to see if there are any suitable candidates. Noticing that he still had no intention of following her, Tadish inwardly curled her lips. However, she had already said enough, and it wasn't convenient for her to appear too impatient. After Wanyan Zhongjie paid his respects, he obediently stood to the side and said with a smile, Are you talking about state affairs? Don't worry about me. Continue. I'll just stand here and wait for Uncle. Goodbye was exceptionally gloomy, thinking, How can we talk while you are here? Especially when she thought that Song Qingshu was about to be taken away by another woman. She was even more depressed. Unfortunately, with her current identity, it was not convenient for her to ask him to stay. She could only wave her hand impatiently. Out of sight, out of mind, out of mind. I've almost said what I wanted to say. You and your uncle can leave now. Hearing this, Wanyan Zhongjie became even more depressed. I'll leave. Emperor Qingshu, he said. I'll be. He became even more excited. I will Qingshu. He excitedly. He said. ILLD. And bow. Qing. I and said ll. Madam. Shu. Liang. Qi Liang. Huatang J. Madamabai smiled. Look Chu Ju. Qing. Jia. W. Goodbye spat. He's not my husband. He can go wherever he wants. Meanwhile, Song Qingshu and Wanyan Zhongjie were walking in the imperial palace. He could feel the young woman's soft body almost hanging onto his. With a faint smile, Song Qingshu said, You are a young woman. Don't you know that men and women should not touch each other? Wanyan Zhongjie raised his head and glanced at him. You are my uncle, he said carelessly. Why do you care about the inappropriateness between men and women with your elders? Suddenly, her expression changed, and she revealed a strange expression. You wouldn't have any dirty thoughts about this niece of mine, would you? Song Qingshu was speechless. You know very well that I am not your uncle. Wanyan Zhongjie already knew that Song Qingshu was pretending to be Tang Quobian. I don't care. In any case, I'll treat you as my uncle. Wanyan Zhongjie snorted, revealing a young girl's unique arrogance. I've never seen you so intimate with Tang Quobian before. A faint smile appeared on Song Qingshu's face as he saw through her thoughts. Sure enough, Wanyan Zhongjie's face reddened. However, she quickly raised her chin and said, The past is the past, and the present is the present. Don't you know that a young girl's heart is the most fickle in the world? Song Qingshu smiled. He had no intention of continuing to bicker with the young girl. Instead, he asked, How did you know that I was back so quickly? Because I've been sending people to keep an eye on the Marshal's mansion. Today, I happened to see Tang Quobian come out with Madame Peach Blossom by his side. If it wasn't you, then who else could it be? Wanyan Zhongjie didn't finish his sentence, but his meaning was clear. Usually, it was Tish who pretended to be Tang Quobian. Now that Tish was dressed as a woman and had Tang Quobian by her side, It was obvious that the main character had returned. Why was her mother looking for me? Song Qing-shu couldn't help but ask. If there was nothing important, she wouldn't have sent people to keep an eye on Tang Quobian's mansion. I don't know either. Wanyan Zhongjie blinked his eyes innocently. Maybe my mother misses you. Song Qing-shu's face darkened. How could there be a daughter in this world who would joke about her mother's reputation like you? Do you really want to find yourself a godfather? Of course, I'm not willing to accept anyone else who wants to be my godfather, Wanyan Zhongjie said as she looked Song Qing-shu up and down. But if it's you who wants to be my godfather, I don't mind. Song Qing-shu couldn't take it anymore. In my world, we call this Oedipus complex. Oedipus complex. Wanyan Zhongjie blinked. Not only was she not angry, she even tightened her grip on Song Qing-shu. I lost my father when I was young, so it's normal for me to have an Oedipus complex. Song Qing-shu was finally defeated by her. He decided to ignore her and ignore her. At this time, the two of them had arrived at the entrance of the palace. Not only was Tang Kuo's carriage waiting for them, but even Wanyan Zhongjie's carriage was waiting for them. However, Wanyan Zhongjie clearly had no intention of returning to her carriage. She went straight to Tang Kuo's carriage, but was stopped by the guards at the entrance. Hey, what are you doing? I want to ride in the same carriage as Uncle. Wanyan Zhongjie was immediately dissatisfied when she was stopped by the guards. Song Qing-shu glanced at her indifferently. In the end, he waved his hand, indicating for the guards to withdraw and let her in. Wanyan Zhongjie glared at the guards with a pleased expression. Then, like an agile fox, he slipped into the carriage. Let's go. Now that he was the #1 person in the Jin Imperial Court, he was naturally accompanied by a large group of guards to ensure his safety. It was a very impressive sight. If it was a few years ago, Song Qing-shu might have been intoxicated by this feeling. However, ever since he woke up from his obsession in the Manchurian Imperial Palace, he was no longer affected by it. Don't you know that this will lead to a lot of rumors? After the carriage had traveled for a while, Song Qing-shu opened his eyes and looked at the beautiful girl beside him. Tang Kuo's private carriage was naturally extremely luxurious and spacious. In some ways, it could be considered the Rolls-Royce of this world. However, she still sat very close to him. Wanyan Zhongjie looked surprised. You are now the most powerful person in the court, yet you are still afraid of rumors? Chapter 16:27. Wanyan Zhongjie chuckled. Do you think our reputation as mother and daughter has been good all these years? I don't know how many men are secretly coveting us mother and daughter, planning to sleep with us. So, it's better to find the strongest man, so that other demons and monsters won't dare to have any ideas about us. Song Qing-shu indifferently said, So you deliberately acted intimately with me in public, just to show others? You're a magnanimous person. You won't mind me tearing off your tiger skin, right? As Wanyan Zhongjie spoke, she hugged his arm and shook it like a spoiled daughter. I'm not one of those youths in the capital who's head over heels in love with you. Song Qing-shu looked at her with a smile that wasn't a smile. I have to bear this kind of reputation for no reason. How do you plan on compensating me? Wanyan Zhongjie's body stiffened imperceptibly, but she quickly smiled and said, What kind of compensation do you want? Song Qing-shu reached out and gently stroked her smooth hair. You deliberately seduced me, and now you're asking me what I want? Wanyan Zhongjie replied with a smile. As long as Aunt doesn't mind, I'll do whatever you want. Hearing her mention goodbye, Song Qing-shu's face darkened. You win. For some reason, he couldn't bear to see this gentle and beautiful woman hurt in the slightest. Perhaps it was because of her gentleness, or perhaps it was because she brought him the warmth of home. Thank you for the compliment. Wanyan Zhongjie smiled like a little fox. Don't call her aunt. Goodbye isn't much older than you. Calling her like that makes you sound old. Song Qing-shu felt gloomy. Even the way she addressed him made him unhappy. Goodbye was only in her 20s, and she sounded like an auntie when she kept calling her aunt. She really is my aunt. Besides, she's more than 10 years older than me. Shouldn't I call her aunt instead of sister? Wanyan Zhongjie pouted with an aggrieved expression, but there was a trace of craftiness in her eyes. What are you trying to say by repeatedly emphasizing the age difference between you two? Song Qingshu keenly saw through her little thoughts, and his expression instantly became unfriendly. Wanyan Zhongjie's face paled as he sensed the temperature in the carriage drop. Song Qingshu's voice became incomparably cold. She is your aunt, and she has always loved you dearly. I was wrong. Wanyan Zhongjie's eyes were as resplendent as the stars. At this moment, there was a faint layer of mist covering them, making them incomparably dense. It was enough to make any man feel pity for him. However, Song Qingshu's expression turned even colder. You're still acting in front of me? Wanyan Zhongjie blinked his eyes. His previous pitiful expression, which was on the verge of tears, disappeared in an instant. Instead, it was replaced by a look of astonishment and worship, as expected of the man who subdued Annie's body and mind. Even this couldn't fool you. Song Qingshu was still indifferent. Change it to flattery? Unfortunately, I don't buy it either. Then what should I do? Wanyan Zhongjie's small mouth curled up, revealing a young girl's innate arrogance. Since I can't flatter you, then I'll change it to you spanking my butt. That should appease your anger, right? As she spoke, she bent down and stuck out her petite and firm butt in front of him. Song Qingshu was speechless. At this moment, a long sigh suddenly came from outside. How much did a man have to accomplish in life to not die a nameless death? Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat. He lifted the curtains and looked outside. Not far away, he saw an execution ground. On a high platform, a tall and sturdy man was tied up. Behind him stood two bare-chested executioners. It was obvious that the execution was about to take place. The man who had spoken earlier was the one who had been tied up. Although he was about to be beheaded, there was no trace of fear on his face. There was only regret that his ambition had not been fulfilled. Seeing that more and more people had gathered to watch, the two executioners felt embarrassed. They kicked the man's knees, trying to force him to kneel on the ground. Unexpectedly, after a few kicks, the man remained motionless. The man turned around and glared at the executioners. A real man kneels to the heavens and to his parents. If I die, I die. How can I kneel? What a real man! Wanyan Zhongjie exclaimed from the side. Song Qingshu nodded and looked the man up and down. A strange look appeared in his eyes. Then he called for a guard. Bring that man here with my token. Yes. The guard took the token and left without hesitation. Song Qingshu put down the curtains and closed his eyes to rest. He wasn't worried about the situation outside. Even if he didn't have the token, with Tang Kuo Bian's current status, who would dare to stop him as his personal guard? As expected, not long after, the guard brought the man over. Perhaps he was afraid that the man was on death row, so he didn't untie him. The burly man glanced at Song Qingshu in the carriage with a strange look in his eyes. Then he glanced at the beautiful Wanyan Zhongjie beside him, and a look of amazement flashed across his eyes. However, he quickly shifted his gaze to Song Qingshu and said, Many thanks to the marshal for saving my life. You recognize me? Song Qingshu saw that the man's eyes were honest and upright. He was clearly not a lustful person. Song Qingshu couldn't help but like him a little more. When he heard the man reveal his identity, he was a little surprised. Nowadays, in Daxing Prefecture, anyone can enter and leave with such an imposing manner. Any random guard can make the supervising officer bow and scrape. Aside from the current minister and marshal, who else could it be? The man replied, I didn't expect you to have such a meticulous mind despite your boorish appearance. Song Qingshu smiled and gestured to the guard beside him. Untie this warrior. Yes. The imperial bodyguards did not hesitate. Firstly, Tajkis had trained them to obey orders and prohibitions. Secondly, Tang Kuo Bian's imperial bodyguards were all martial art experts of the army. Therefore, they were not worried that this man would suddenly rise and revolt. By the way, how should I address you? Song Qingshu asked. The man replied, Monk Shun, Monk Wanyan Shun. Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat. He had some recollection of this name. Of course, it wasn't because Tang Kuo Bian knew him, but because he had left a deep mark in history. During the last years of the Jin Kingdom, the Mongols rose to prominence. The two countries fought, and the Jin kingdom lost every battle. Monk Wanyin Shun could be said to be the most dazzling general of the Jin kingdom. He defeated the arrogant Mongols several times. What was even rarer was that he managed his troops strictly. Wherever they went, they did not offend anyone. The streets and alleys were no longer noisy. In every battle, they were the first to break through enemy lines. Unfortunately, the Jin dynasty's momentum was already gone. In the end, the Mongols mobilized their elite generals and fought the Jin dynasty at Three Peaks Mountain. Monk Wanyin Shen's army was defeated and he refused to surrender. He bled his last drop of blood in the street battle. Throughout history, names were like carps crossing the river. The reason why Song Qingshu remembered him, other than being the last famous general of the Jin dynasty, was largely because of his military management and loyalty, which left a deep impression on him. As expected, the advantage of a transmigrator isn't just for show. Song Qingshu sighed inwardly. No wonder so many otakus wanted to transmigrate. After all, it was as if they had an omniscient and omnipotent cheat. They would be able to know the abilities of famous generals and ministers before they rose to power. They would be able to know the heroes of the world in advance. He recalled that Tajkis had mentioned that everything was ready for the establishment of the loyal and filial army. All they lacked was an outstanding commander. Wasn't this man in front of him the best candidate? A famous general on the battlefield, strict management of the army, loyal and righteous. These were practically all the advantages of a famous general. Chapter 1628. Monk Wanyin Shun hesitated for a while before saying, "Last year, my brother was promoted to chief, so I followed him to guard Fangcheng." Song Qingshu had been the Jin for so long that he was familiar with the geography of the Jin. He knew that Fangcheng was located in Hunan in the future, and it was a battleground for military strategists in ancient times. During the spring and autumn warring states period, Chu from the Jianghan Plain went north and conquered many small countries in the Nanyang Basin. To the north of the Nanyang Basin was the Crouching Bull Mountains, to the west was the Qinling Mountains, and to the southeast was the Tongbai Mountains. They were all dangerous places. In the northeast, there were some hills between the Crouching Bull Mountains and the Tongbai Mountains. During the Xia dynasty, this was the passageway between the Central Plains and the Nanyang Basin, so it was called the Xia Road. Later on, Chu often attacked the Central Plains, and the other countries of the Central Plains also attacked Chu from here. Chu built the Great Wall of Chu on these hills and called it Fangcheng. Hence, this strategic place was called the Xia Road. Now that the Jin occupied the Nanyang Basin, they were confronting the southern Song dynasty Xiangyang. The Deng and Tang prefectures were the Jin's first line of defense. If the southern Song dynasty broke through the first line of defense and occupied the Nanyang Basin, the Xia Road would be the second line of defense. "Is your brother Wanyin Xielia?" Song Qingshu was curious. He had been in charge of the Jin for so long. How could he not be familiar with such a strategic place? Monk Wanyin Chun revealed a look of surprise and nodded. Yes. Song Qingshu couldn't help but be in a good mood. Although Wanyin Xielia wasn't as capable as his younger brother, he was still a famous and valiant general in the army. He was really lucky today to be able to get this pair of famed brothers. After some questioning, he found out why Monk Wanyin Shun had committed such a crime. It turned out that when Xielia was sick and his brother Monk Shun was in charge of military affairs, General Li Taiha and General Gu Yiwang of Fangcheng got into a quarrel. In the end, it developed into a fight, and Gu Yiwang went to Monk Shun to complain. Monk Shun asked about the whole story and found out that Gu Yiwang was in the wrong, so he ordered the soldiers to beat him. Who would have thought that Gu Yiwang was a hot-tempered and ferocious man? He was humiliated by the fact that he was beaten on the spot. He died of depression, and his last words were for his wife to avenge him. His wife was also a valiant woman. She immediately filed a complaint against Monk Shun, saying that Monk Shun violated her duty due to personal grudges and intentionally killed her husband. She complained to the censorate, the Minister of State, and the Chamberlain. She also piled up firewood at the south of Longjing Bridge, claiming that if Monk Shun was not punished, she would burn herself to apologize to her husband. This matter caused a big commotion, and the impact was not good. Moreover, there were Gu Yueng's friends among the remonstrant officials, so they concluded that Monk Chun held military power and acted arbitrarily, violating the country's law. In the end, he was sentenced to death. After knowing the whole story, Song Qingshu secretly lamented that the ancient legal system was a joke. At the end of the day, it was still ruled by men. It all depended on who had the strongest backing and who would win. Originally, he was worried that monk Wanyin Chun would be sentenced to death because of his crimes. Now that his last doubts were gone, he no longer hesitated and said, "Although I am the minister of state of the imperial court, it is not good for me to interfere with justice. However, the imperial court is facing internal and external troubles, and we are about to go to war with the Southern Song dynasty. We are in need of manpower, so I'll give you a chance. You will be removed from your official position in Facheng, and from now on, you can work under me from the bottom to make up for your crimes. How about it?" Although Monk Wanyin Chun was righteous, he was not a fool. How could he miss such a good opportunity when the most powerful person in the imperial court offered him an olive branch? Moreover, he needed a higher platform to realize his ambitions. He hurriedly half-knelt and saluted. Monk Chun pays his respects to the Lord. Song Qingshu was very satisfied. Previously, Monk Chun would rather die than kneel, but now he was willing to half-kneel. It was obvious that he was thanking Song Qingshu for saving his life. At the same time, Monk Chun did not address him as an official of the imperial court, but as his lord. This had already expressed his loyalty. "Quickly, please rise." Song Qingshu personally stood up and helped him up. "If the Lord treats me as a scholar of the nation, I will repay him as a scholar of the nation. If the Lord treats me as a passerby, I will repay him as a passerby. If the Lord treats me as grass, I will repay him as an enemy." Monk Wanyin Chun was worthy of such treatment. "Someone, bring my horse over." A look of surprise flashed across the guard's face, but he still obediently brought a fine horse over. Song Qingshu took the reins and handed them to Monk Wanyin Chun. "This horse can travel 1,000 miles in the day and 800 miles in the night. It should be galloping on the battlefield. It is a waste of its talent to be my mount. As the saying goes, a precious horse is given to a hero. I will give it to you in hopes that in the future you will not disappoint me and make contributions to the imperial court." Monk Wanyin Chun had been in the army for many years, so how could he not know whether a horse was good or bad? The horse's body was full and graceful, with well-developed muscles. Its entire body exuded a layer of dark and shiny luster. It did not look like a horse, but more like a ferocious beast. Even a blind man could tell that this was a divine steed that was one in a million. "Thank you, my lord." Monk Wanyin Chun took the reins under the envious gazes of the guards. Even though Monk Wanyin Chun had a firm will, he could not help but choke with sobs. Not long ago, he thought that he would definitely die and had nowhere to display his abilities. He did not expect that not only would he escape death, but he would also receive such attention from the number one person of the imperial court. Actually, under normal circumstances, it would not be easy for Song Qingshu to win over Monk Wanyin Chun's heart. However, today was a special occasion. In addition, Song Qingshu treated Wanyin Chun with the courtesy of a scholar of the nation, just like the arrogant Han Xian of the past. Even though he had already divided the world into 3 parts and was on par with Liu Bang and Xiang Yu, he still could not forget the kindness that Liu Bang had shown him when he was at his lowest. "That's right. I have a question for you," Song Qingshu suddenly said. "My lord, feel free to ask. I will tell you everything I know." If this was a game, Monk Wanyin Chun's impression of Song Qingshu would have already been maxed out. "Do you know Qin Ergu?" Song Qingshu asked as he stared at Monk Wanyin Chun. "Qin Ergu?" Monk Wanyin Chun shook his head, and a trace of confusion flashed in his eyes. "Fire Beacon Giant?" Song Qingshu asked immediately. "Yeah." Monk Wanyin Chun was dumbfounded. He suddenly felt that his lord was strange and a little unreliable. "It's nothing, I was just asking casually." When Song Qingshu heard Monk Wanyin Chun say before his death, "How great must a man's achievements be in order to not be nameless after death?" He couldn't help but think of a novel from his previous life. He thought that fire beacon giant had also transmigrated, but it turned out that it was just a coincidence. Song Qing-shu originally wanted to invite monk Wan Yin-chun to sit in the carriage, but monk Wan Yin-chun refused. Instead, he rode his horse and followed closely behind like a personal guard. Seeing that he couldn't persuade monk Wan Yin-chun, Song Qing-shu didn't force him. In the carriage, Wan Yin-zhongjia looked at him with a smile. "Congratulations on subduing a general." Song Qing-shu glanced at her and said, "I haven't settled the score with you about what happened just now. You have already subdued such a fierce general. This is something worth being happy about. Why do you have to lower yourself to the level of a little girl like me?" Wan Yin-zhongjia started to use her soft and sweet voice to act coquettishly again. Song Qing-shu's eyebrows twitched from being swayed by her. He could only wave his hand and say, all right, I won't settle the score." "Stop acting coquettishly. I knew you the best." Wan Yin-zhongjia's smile became even more radiant. Not long after, they arrived at the Grand Preceptor's residence. When Pucha Elihu married in, her husband hadn't separated from the family yet. Later on, her husband and her father-in-law, Wan Yin-zongpan, were killed in a failed political battle. However, the imperial court remembered Wan Yin-zongpan's contributions and still retained his title as the Grand Preceptor. Thus, the plaque of the Grand Preceptor's residence was still hung at the entrance. Chapter 16:29. Hearing his words, the surrounding guards all had strange expressions on their faces. If they didn't enter through the main entrance, it was obvious that they had snuck in. They thought to themselves that the rumors in the capital about Zhongjia and his daughter being Sir's exclusive women seemed to be true. The two of them must have hooked up a long time ago. The group of guards were all filled with envy. They thought to themselves that Sir was indeed Sir. Only he could enjoy such rare luck with women. Monk Wan Yin-chun, who was at the side, was expressionless from start to finish. He was only interested in what happened on the battlefield. Moreover, his lord was in a high position. It would be abnormal if he didn't have this little bit of romance. The doors of the Grand Preceptor's residence are always open for you. You can come in whenever you want. Wan Yin-zhongjia's gentle words made the surrounding guards even more envious. Song Qing-shu smiled and didn't comment. He was busy with many affairs and probably wouldn't have the chance to enter and exit this place. The Grand Preceptor's residence had long received the news. A group of people stood at the entrance to welcome him. However, Pucha Elihu didn't come out. After all, she was a woman and a widow. It wouldn't be good to welcome him at the entrance. Song Qing-shu naturally didn't mind. Under Zhongjia's lead, the group of people entered the Grand Preceptor's residence. The guards that followed him had their own duties. Some ran to the surroundings to check for danger. Some ran to the main roads to guard the exits, and the rest were to protect him. Even though he didn't need anyone to protect him with his current cultivation, Song Qing-shu didn't reject them. It felt quite convenient to have someone take care of everything. After entering the mansion, a woman in palace attire came out to welcome them. Her dress was very fitting, accentuating her slender waist and perky breasts, revealing her curvaceous curves. Her bright red lips, full and plump breasts, an exquisite and sexy figure made men think of the bed at first glance. She is indeed a stunner. Song Qing-shu sighed inwardly. As expected of the number one beauty of the Jin kingdom, this servant greets Lord Marshal Du. Pucha Elihu bowed gracefully. Her bulging clothes made it seem as though they were about to burst out. "Madam, please get up." After all, she had lived at home for many years, and there were outsiders nearby. Song Qing-shu did not go up to help her up. Instead, it was Wan Yin-zhongjia who bounced over to help her up. "Mother, I was fortunate enough to not disappoint you and invite this busy man over. How are you going to reward me later? You're already such a big girl. Don't you feel ashamed in front of so many people?" Pucha Elihu lovingly scratched his daughter's nose. After Song Qing-shu's guidance, the knot in their hearts had been resolved. Now, the two of them depended on each other, and their relationship was immeasurably good. One was gorgeous and charming. while the other was beautiful and elegant. When the mother and daughter stood together, they were like the most beautiful scenery in the world, causing all the men around them to breathe rapidly. With Song Qingshu's current mental fortitude, he would naturally not be bewitched like this. With a natural expression, he said, "May I know why Madam has summoned me? It's very windy outside. Let's talk inside." Pucha Elihu did not answer. Instead, she invited him with a smile. "This servant has already prepared food and wine. I hope sir will do me the honor." Song Qingshu looked at the sky. Night was gradually falling. In addition, he had been rushing back and forth today and had not had time to eat, so he did not refuse. "Then I will trouble Madam." Pucha Elihu smiled charmingly and led Song Qingshu to the backyard. As they walked, she explained, the banquet was specially set in the backyard. You can enjoy the scenery while drinking wine. Song Qingshu had a strange expression. He thought, "You're a woman living alone in the backyard, entertaining a man. No matter how I look at it, there seems to be an ulterior motive." However, as a man, he did not care about such things. In any case, with such a charming great beauty and a beautiful and exquisite little beauty accompanying him, at worst, he would just deal with whatever came his way. Next, Song Qingshu had the guards guard the perimeter. After all, the women of most mansions lived in the backyard and did not allow unfamiliar men to enter. Of course, he was not so dazzled by beauty that he forgot himself. He had another intention, which was to lure the snake out of its hole. He had always been very curious about why Zhongjie and her daughter had come to find him. He wondered if they had set up an ambush here to obtain the antidote for the 3-corpse brain divine pill. The fact that the other party had specially set up the banquet in the backyard further proved his guess. After all, this way, they could justifiably stop most of his personal guards. Song Qingshu simply went with the flow. In any case, he was skilled and daring. He was not afraid of an ambush. It would be troublesome if the other party kept hiding. Leaving Wang Yinshun and the guards outside, Song Qingshu followed the mother and daughter to the backyard. He thought to himself, "The two of them have seen my martial arts, yet they still dare to make trouble for me. What kind of strange poison did they prepare, or did they find a master to help them? For example, Wang Yinzhongjie's mysterious master? Wang Yinzhongjie's martial arts were extraordinary. Considering that she had reached such a level of attainment at such a young age, it was even more astonishing. Song Qingshu was very curious about the identity of her mysterious master. However, along the way, he did not discover any ambushes or the aura of any experts. He could not help but feel very puzzled. "Young master, please take a seat." Pucha Elihu's coquettish voice sounded. At this moment, they had already reached their destination. They were in an extremely elegant room. Looking out from the window, they could see the flowing water in the garden and the lush greenery. After sitting down, Song Qingshu was about to speak when Wang Yinzhongjie, who was beside him, raised her wine cup as if she had predicted it. "Let's toast to Big Brother first." Hearing the way she addressed him, Song Qingshu's heart trembled. He thought that they were planning to expose his identity, so he hurriedly increased the volume of his wine cup. However, there was no one else within 100 feet radius, and he did not have to worry about being heard. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. He knew that he had worried too much. They had been poisoned by him, and their lives were in his hands. Unless he was forced to the last resort, exposing his identity would not do them any good. "You call me the wrong way. Zhongjie should drink as a penalty." Even so, Song Qingshu did not raise his wine cup. Instead, he said indifferently, the other party's intentions were unclear, so it was better to be careful. Wang Yinzhongjie pouted. "There are no outsiders here." "Why?" Pucha Elihu, who was at the side, interrupted her. "Impudent. He is your uncle. How can you call him that?" After glaring at her daughter, she turned back to Song Qingshu and said softly, "Zhongjie is young and insensible. Please be magnanimous and don't lower yourself to her level. I'll drink this cup of wine on her behalf." She was older and had protected her orphan and widowed mother in the center of the whirlpool of power all these years. Naturally, she was more meticulous than most people. From the other party's tone, She could acutely sense that he was unwilling to remove his disguise. He was clearly on guard. However, it was not convenient for her to explain the whole story. She could only go along with his wishes, lest something unresolvable happened later. After saying this, she raised her wine cup and drained it in one gulp. Then, she turned the cup towards Song Qing-shu with a slight smile. Seeing that her fingers were as white as the porcelain cup, Song Qing-shu could not help but sigh at her natural beauty. His expression naturally softened. Chapter 16:30. After that, they didn't mention the purpose of their visit, and Song Qing-shu didn't ask either. They toasted each other and only talked about romance, not business. The atmosphere gradually warmed up. Because of the wine, Pucha Elihu and Wanyan Zhongjia's originally fair cheeks were now flushed red, making them even more beautiful. The entire room seemed to be brighter under the light of their faces. Song Qing-shu looked at his mother, then at his daughter. He couldn't help but sigh in admiration. Plums, orchids, bamboos, chrysanthemums, each had their own advantages. One was mature and beautiful, while the other was pure and enchanting. He really didn't know who to look at. However, even the most beautiful scenery had its end. Song Qing-shu put down his wine cup and said, "It's getting late. I should go. Thank you for your warm hospitality, Madam and Mississippi. You're leaving so soon?" A pitiful look flashed through Pucha Elihu's eyes. If it weren't for the fact that Song Qing-shu knew about her past, he really might have been tricked by her. All good things must come to an end. Besides, I've been running back and forth today. I'm a bit tired. I want to go home and rest. Song Qing-shu wasn't moved in the slightest. If my lord wants to rest, there's no need to go so far. You can just rest in my humble abode. Pucha Elihu's eyes were like limpid autumn waters, and she spoke shyly. Spend the night at Madam's place? Song Qing-shu looked at her with a smile that wasn't quite a smile. I'm afraid that's not very convenient. In the past, there had been all sorts of rumors in the capital, but they were just rumors. He had come here with great fanfare. If he stayed here for a night, everyone in the capital would know what had happened the next day. At that time, the mother and daughter would become Tranquil Bien's exclusive property, and it would be difficult for Wanyan Zhongjia to get married in the future. I and my daughter don't mind. Why are you afraid, my lord? Pucha Elihu said with a red face. Wanyan Zhongjia also lowered his head shyly. Song Qing-shu's heart couldn't help but jump. What's going on? Are they really planning to do that? He knew that because of the death of their husband and father-in-law, the mother and daughter had been living very hard these past few years. Especially as Chong Jie gradually grew up, she became more and more beautiful. Her beautiful appearance did not bring them happiness, but instead brought them endless disasters. Moreover, now that their lives were in his hands, could it be that they were planning to completely rely on him? That way, they would be able to avoid any blind crazy bees and butterflies having designs on them. And it would also be able to cure the strange poison in their bodies. But I can't sleep anywhere. I'm not used to sleeping alone on an empty bed. I can only sleep soundly when my neck is crossed. Song Qing-shu collected his thoughts and decided to test them first. Sir, don't worry. Pucha Elihu smiled charmingly and said to his daughter, Chongjia, go and prepare. Yes, mother. Wanyan Zhongjia's face was so red that it looked like blood was about to drip out. When he left, he didn't even dare to look at Song Qing-shu. Even with his extraordinary willpower, Song Qing-shu couldn't help but feel his heart skip a beat. There were two layers of meaning in her words. Perhaps she wanted Chongjia to prepare a room for him, or perhaps she wanted Chongjia to prepare it herself. Suddenly, he thought of something and called in the guards outside. He quietly ordered them to send people back to Tang Qua's residence and the palace to stand guard. If there were any signs of trouble, they were to immediately inform him. It turned out that Song Qing-shu suddenly realized that the mother and daughter had come up with all sorts of methods to keep him here. They might not be planning to attack him. Perhaps they were trying to lure him away from his territory so that they could make a move on Tang Qua's residence or the palace. Pucha Elihu, who was standing to the side, looked over in confusion. She didn't know why he had called in the guards. After the guards left, Song Qing-shu relaxed and said, "Madam, shall we continue drinking?" "Sure." Pucha Elihu took the initiative to come over and refill his cup. Her voluptuous and enchanting figure, coupled with her strong fragrance, was enough to intoxicate any man. Very soon, Song Qing-shu was drunk. Of course, he was pretending to be drunk. He wanted to see what the other party was planning. Sir. Seeing him sprawled on the table, Pucha Elihu reached out and shook his shoulder lightly. However, the reply she got was Song Qing-shu's muffled voice. Refill my cup again." Seeing that he was really drunk, Pucha Elihu smiled triumphantly. "Sir, you've drunk too much. Let me help you to your room to rest." "I'm not drunk," Song Qing-shu mumbled. Unfortunately, he was like a dead pig, leaning heavily on Pucha Elihu. Feeling his weight, Pucha Elihu's smile froze. She could only grit her teeth and help him to the back. Fortunately, he could still walk on his own. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to bring him to his destination alone. "Where's this?" Song Qing-shu pretended to be in a daze as he looked at the quiet room in front of him. "This is where Sir will be resting tonight," Pucha Elihu explained while panting. "I said it's hard for me to sleep alone," Song Qing-shu mumbled. Pucha Elihu revealed a charming smile. "Don't worry, sir. Everything has been prepared. Is Madame going to accompany me personally?" "How could I do that?" Along the way, half of his body was pressed against her. Song Qing-shu only had one feeling, and that was softness. Her body was really soft to the extreme, making people involuntarily have an impulse to ruthlessly ravage her. Using the excuse of being drunk, he reached out and touched her face. It was still as tight as a young girl's. He wondered how she maintained her face. Even so, Song Qing-shu's heart was as cold as ice. He thought that the other party would be angry at his probing, but she actually giggled and said, "My lord, you are really drunk. How could a lowly servant like me have the face to serve my lord? There are already younger and more beautiful girls waiting to serve my lord." "Is that so?" Song Qing-shu's heart skipped a beat. With his level of cultivation, how could he not notice that there was a young girl lying nervously on the bed in the room? From her words, it seemed that Wanyan Zhongjie was inside. In fact, after a night of probing, he had more or less confirmed that Pucha Elihu didn't have any ulterior motives. She just wanted to use a honey trap on him. The only thing he was curious about was who she would send to do it. Would it be the mother or the daughter? Of course, he had fantasized about the situation that all men would fantasize about, but he knew that it was just a fantasy. Whether it was in the future or this world, that kind of situation was not tolerated by the secular world. Song Qing-shu couldn't help but admire the historical Wanyan Liang. He had really achieved all the fantasies of men. Of course, the price he had to pay was that he would be recognized by history as a licentious ruler. While his mind was wandering, Pucha Elihu had already left behind an ambiguous smile, considerately closed the door for him, and floated away. Chapter 16:31. This little girl. Thinking of Wanyan Zhongjie's shy and nervous expression as she left, Song Qing-shu sighed inwardly. It was no wonder that when he asked her what she wanted, she clenched her teeth and refused to say a word. How could she open her mouth when it came to this kind of thing? Song Qing-shu lifted the bed curtains and sat on the bed. He began to ponder, should I eat the meat that's already been delivered to my mouth? He had always thought that Pucha Elihu was setting up a hongmen banquet, but now it turned out to be a honey trap. He didn't know if he should advance or retreat, especially when he thought of Wanyan Zhongjie's stunning beauty that could topple cities. Song Qing-shu couldn't help but feel his heart heat up. He couldn't deny that this little girl was a source of calamity, a femme fatale that could make any man's heart beat faster. However, Song Qing-shu shook his head and suppressed the impulse in his heart. This kind of muddled situation was like child's play. There was still a long way to go if he wanted to obtain Wanyan Zhongjie. There was no need to be so impatient. It was better to simmer the sweetest fruit slowly. I'll go back first. Song Qing-shu was about to get up, but the young girl who had been observing him from the bed became anxious. She immediately sat up and stretched out her slender arms to wrap around him. "Don't go." The young girl's voice trembled violently. It was obvious that she was extremely afraid. Even her voice had changed a little. Song Qing-shu could keenly sense the young girl's delicate and warm body behind him. At this moment, she wasn't wearing a single piece of clothing. Tonight's banquet was attended by two beautiful women, one big and one small. Song Qing-shu didn't deliberately use his internal energy to force himself to drink. After the mother and daughter took turns to coax him to drink, he was already 50 to 60% tipsy. When he was stimulated by the young girl's warm and smooth skin, the desire that he had been suppressing exploded out with a bang. "Forget it. I can't be bothered to simmer it slowly." This thought flashed through Song Qing-shu's mind. He turned around and hugged the young girl's smooth, jade-like body and fell down. The girl seemed to be shy as she pulled the blanket over the two of them. Song Qing-shu was startled, but he couldn't care less at this moment. After a deliberately suppressed cry, Song Qing-shu's expression changed, and his heart instantly became unbearably agitated, because with his rich experience, he could sense that the young girl was not a virgin. He had always doted on Wanyan Chongjia. On one hand, it was because of her beauty. On the other hand, it was because of her charming personality. On the other hand, it was because of her flawless purity. Pucha Alaho might not be a good mother. Over the years, she had been involved with many nobles in the capital, but she had always protected her daughter very well. She was so good that she was as pure as a white flower in this big dye vat. Although Song Qing-shu didn't have many intimate interactions with Wanyan Chongjia, in his heart, he had already regarded her as his exclusive property. Now that he found out that she had been taken by another man, how could he not be angry? He didn't continue to move. Instead, he lifted the blanket and coldly stared at the young girl beneath him. There was no light in the room, so the first thing he saw in the darkness was the girl's eyes. They were like a pool of sparkling spring water, clear and transparent, lovely and moving. Unfortunately, Song Qing-shu didn't have any tenderness for the fairer sex. He was just about to vent his anger. Suddenly, his expression froze. He realized that the person in front of him wasn't the Wanyan Chongjia he had imagined, but another young girl that he also knew. Although there were no candles in the room, with Song Qing-shu's current cultivation, he could clearly see the young girl's appearance in the faint moonlight. The lines of her face were soft and beautiful, and she had a bright red and tender cherry mouth. Every inch of her exposed skin was sparkling and translucent, as if carved from jade. Because of what had just happened, her eyes clearly revealed a trace of shyness. There was an indescribable fear and weakness on her pretty face, making people want to love and protect her. Pucha Qiu Cao. Song Qing-shu recognized her identity. Of course, she wasn't a virgin. On the way to the Chongyang sect, she had been tricked by Tadish and placed on his bed by him, and by a freak combination of factors, she had lost her virginity. After all this time, it turned out that he had cuckolded himself. Song Qing-shu's expression immediately became very interesting. He rejoiced and was especially angry. He immediately shouted, "Alaho, what the hell are you doing? Get in here." This was a sound wave formed by his inner force. He had already sensed that Pucha Alaho was in a nearby room, so this angry roar was equivalent to a fixed-point projection. He didn't have to worry about alerting the others in the residence. Very soon, Pucha Alaho came in with a smile and a lamp in her hand. What orders does the marshal have? Perhaps because she knew that this matter wasn't right, she didn't bring Wanyan Zhongjia with her. She was worried that he would vent his anger on her daughter. Song Qing-shu stretched out his hand and pinched the air. The flame of the oil lamp in Pucha Alaho's hand was directly sucked into his fingertips. Then, with a flick of his fingers, the flame split into several parts and shot towards the red candles in the room. The red candles were quickly lit, and the room was once again restored to light. If a senior monk from the Shaolin Temple were here, he would definitely be dumbfounded. That move just now seemed to have combined the essence of the flower-pinching finger and the multi-layered leaf finger. Its degree of subtlety far surpassed those two supreme techniques. It was truly a marvelous skill. Pucha Elihu's red lips were wide open. Even Pucha Chiozao, who had kept her head down all this time, raised her head in astonishment. However, after the initial shock, she quickly lowered her head again. She silently covered her chest with a blanket and knelt on the bed. Song Qing-shu pointed at Pucha Chiozao and glared angrily at Pucha Elihu. What the hell is going on? How could he not be angry? After all, Pucha Chiozao was Yang's fiancé in the Jin Kingdom. In the end, they ended up having an affair due to a freak combination of factors. He was already very vexed. In the end, he could only use the soul transfer technique to erase her memory and reluctantly let the matter go. Who knew that this would happen again today? Why was Pucha Chiozao so unlucky? Every time she was carelessly robbed of her chastity by a man in the dark. Was it because she didn't have a name and was lacking in the 5 elements? What was even more annoying was that she was Yang's fiancé. He was already very apologetic for snatching Xiao Longnu from his hands, so he didn't want to be involved with his fiancé at all. Unfortunately, things didn't go as he wished. He actually had an affair with her twice in a row. At this point, he couldn't pretend to be deaf and mute like before and erase her memory. He just treated it as a one-night stand from his previous life. How could he not be angry when he thought of the troublesome things that would follow? He had carefully guarded himself for half a day, but in the end, he was still tricked by Pucha Elihu. As his martial arts cultivation and status grew higher and higher, his self-restraint could be said to be able to remain calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. He rarely showed any expression of losing his composure, but this time, he really couldn't hold it in anymore. "Marshal, don't worry. Chiozao did it willingly," Pucha Elihu said calmly as he watched the man in front of him fly into a rage. Chapter 1632. Marshal, please listen to this servant's explanation. Not long ago, Autumn Grass's father and brother acted rashly and started a rebellion in the palace. Of course, they were no match for the marshal's wisdom and might. After their defeat, the entire Pucha family fell into desperate straits. Pucha Elihu looked pitifully at the girl on the bed. For some reason, His Majesty has kept them locked up in the imperial prison, but anyone with a discerning eye knows that those who participated in the rebellion will not escape death. In order to save her father and brother, in order to save the entire Pucha family, Autumn Grass could only beg me. But what can a woman like me do? I'm afraid that only the marshal can save them in this world. Song Qing-shu finally remembered that Pucha Elihu was also from the Pucha family. He should be Autumn Grass's aunt, so it was no wonder he would help her. Pucha Elihu sneaked a peek at his expression before continuing. But the rebellion is of great importance. Even though the marshal is powerful, I'm afraid he won't be willing to wade into these muddy waters, unless there's a reason he has no choice but to save them. The marshal is a man who has tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex, so no matter how much we thought about it, we could only come up with this plan. Please forgive us, Marshal. Pucha Elihu knelt on the ground as he spoke, looking like he was at the mercy of the marshal. Song Qing-shu laughed in anger. You think I'll save them like this? Do you think I'm an idiot? Pucha Elihu sighed faintly. We know that even if everything succeeds, the chances of the marshal agreeing in the end are extremely slim. However, Autumn Grass is willing to bet her chastity for this one in a million chance. Whether it was Pucha Elihu or Pucha Autumn Grass herself, neither of them had expected that her chastity had long since been taken by Song Qing-shu. Hearing Pucha Elihu's words, Song Qing-shu subconsciously glanced at Autumn Grass. She was no longer as spirited as before. Right now, she seemed like the weakest and most helpless girl in the world. Apologies for disturbing the marshal. I hope the marshal will forget today's matters. After receiving Song Qing-shu's rejection, Pucha Autumn Grass silently picked up the clothes on the bed with an expression as if he had expected it. Then, he wrapped himself in a thin blanket and walked out. However, the moment he got off the bed, his legs gave way and he almost fell to the ground. A blush flashed across her face, and she staggered out. Song Qing-shu frowned as he looked at her lonely, frail, and battered figure. "Wait a minute," he said. Pucha Chiozao revealed a trace of doubt. Beside her, Pucha Elihu was overjoyed. He hurriedly pushed his niece and said, "Hurry up and thank the marshal. He's willing to help you. Your father and brother can be saved." The impact of tonight's experience was too great. Pucha Autumn Grass was still in a daze as she turned to look at the man who had taken over her body. Song Qing-shu said indifferently, "Listen well, Elihu. I'm willing to help not because of your messy behavior, but because of another reason. It would have been fine if it had only happened once, but it had happened twice in a row." Song Qing-shu felt that he had let Pucha Chiozao down. Moreover, the current situation of the Pucha family was largely due to him. If he hadn't appeared, she would still be that carefree young miss and wouldn't have fallen to the point where she had to sacrifice her body. If he really didn't care, he would inevitably blame himself in the dead of night. At his current level, having a clear mind was the most important thing. Pucha Elihu clearly didn't care why he had changed his mind. The marshal is indeed a good person. Song Qing-shu felt gloomy at being inexplicably labeled as a good person. He got up and said indifferently, "Don't be happy too early. She can be spared from death, but she can't escape punishment. Her father and brother can be spared, but the Pucha family won't be able to recover its former glory." As one of the three great families of the Jin Kingdom, the Pucha family's influence ran deep. From the imperial court to the local government, there were officials in the Pucha family. If the Jin Kingdom wanted to eradicate the Pucha family, it would definitely cause a national upheaval. This was also the reason why Pucha Shiji, and the others were locked up and not sentenced to death. Since he had encountered such a thing tonight, he might as well go with the flow and sell them a favor. At the same time, he could also make up for the guilt he felt towards Pucha Chiozao. Pucha Chiozao, on the other hand, didn't know the whole story. She knelt on the ground with a thud and said with a choked voice, "I'm already satisfied to be able to save my family. I don't dare to hope for anything else." Song Qing-shu nodded with a cold expression. Just as he was about to leave, Pucha Elihu hurriedly stopped him. "It's already so late. Where's the marshal going? Besides, you're the benefactor of the Pucha family. Chiozao wants to thank you properly. Isn't that right, Chiozao?" She was worried that if she let Song Qing-shu leave like this, things would change. It was safer to keep him in a gentle home. Beside her, Pucha Chiozao was taken aback, her face instantly turning red. However, since this concerned her family, she could only muster her courage and nod softly. Song Qing-shu sneered, "Why didn't I realize that Madam was so good at pandering?" Pucha Elihu's expression changed. After all, it was embarrassing for a woman to be insulted like this. However, she couldn't afford to offend the man in front of her, not to mention that she was the one in the wrong. Song Qing-shu continued, "Only now do I remember that Madam is also from the Pucha family. Why are you only encouraging your niece to sacrifice herself? Why don't you sacrifice yourself for the family?" This time, Pucha Elihu was truly flustered. She smiled sheepishly. How could a withered willow, like me, enter the marshal's eyes? Naturally, I wouldn't dare make a fool of myself. Is that so? Song Qing-shu shook his head. But I like women like Madam, who are as mature as honey peaches. The marshal must be joking. Pucha Elihu's expression changed several times. Although she had a terrible reputation in the capital and was known for her flirtatious ways, it had always been for the sake of avenging her husband. All the men she had seduced had died without exception. After Wan Yanliang's death, she had gotten rid of all her enemies. In addition, for the sake of her own image and her daughter's heart, she had long since resolved to turn over a new leaf. "I've never liked to joke," Song Qing-shu said in a low voice as he looked at her quietly. Pucha Elihu was flustered by his stare. In truth, she didn't reject this man, especially since he had avenged her and was the benefactor of the Grand Preceptor's household. Well, serving him once wasn't something she couldn't accept. More importantly, She had just made a promise to her daughter not long ago. In addition, there was a junior here. No matter how magnanimous she was, she still had to consider the issue of face. Pucha Qiucao stood there awkwardly, not knowing if she should stay or leave. Thinking back to how this man had quickly retreated after entering her body, and connecting the dots to what he had said to her aunt, how could she not understand that he had no interest in her? Thinking about how she had made such a huge sacrifice, yet the other party didn't care about her most precious thing, Pucha Elihu felt so wrong that she was about to cry. Chapter 16:33. Did I say you could leave? Before she could walk out the door, she heard Song Qingshu's voice. Even Pucha Elihu was dumbfounded. This situation didn't seem right. Could it be that he wanted to do it with the two of them? Pucha Elihu's heart tightened. She hurriedly chased that thought out of her mind. She could only pray that the other party didn't mean that. Unfortunately, the other party's next words shattered her fantasies. Madam, aren't you going to close the door? Pucha Elihu bit her lips, struggling internally. Was he really going to do it with the two of them? With his niece? But if she disobeyed him, the Pucha family would really be finished. Not only that, Chong Jie and I were also poisoned. Forget it. I'll let him off easy this time. Let's see if I can get the antidote for Chong Jie. Pucha Elihu's expression changed. In the end, she made up her mind. The only thing worth rejoicing about was being with Autumn Grass and not his daughter. That would be really embarrassing. She slowly walked to the door. At this time, she could even hear her nervous heartbeat. Her round face was already beautiful. She knew that it wasn't because she was drunk. Thinking about how she had suddenly become like a little girl after all these years, Pucha Elihu found it unbelievable. Could it be that she valued that man too much? Her mind was in a mess, but she still slowly closed the door. Just as she was thinking about what to do next, she heard the other party's teasing voice. I told Madam to close the door when you go out. Why is Madam staying in the room? Does Madam want to stay and sleep with you? But your niece is in the room. Isn't that a little bad? Pucha Elihu exclaimed. She finally realized that the other party was purposely messing with her. He was most likely dissatisfied with her scheme tonight and was using this method to take revenge. At this time, she wished there was a hole in the ground to hide in. However, she secretly heaved a sigh of relief. If she really stayed to do it with the two of them, she wouldn't know how to face her niece or daughter in the future. Worried that he would change his mind, Pucha Elihu hurriedly opened the door and ran out. In her hurry, she even forgot to close the door. Seeing her leave in a sorry state, Song Qingshu felt a little better. He waved his hand in the air and closed the door again. He turned around and looked at the girl standing at the side. She didn't even have time to put on any clothes from the beginning until now. She only had a thin blanket wrapped around her vital parts, but her arms and legs were exposed to the air. Now that it was winter, she was already shivering from the cold, and her originally white skin was starting to turn purple. However, her nerves had been highly tense just now, so she did not notice the problem of the cold for a while. Song Qingshu secretly sighed and patted the bed beside him. Qiucao, come and sit down. Pucha Autumn Grass was extremely hesitant. It was still better when her aunt was here earlier, but now that she was alone, she instantly felt extremely nervous. She didn't know how to face this man who had just taken her innocence. Because of her family, she didn't dare to offend him, but she couldn't get over the hurdle in her heart if she wanted him to listen to her. Look at how cold you are. In the end, Song Qingshu couldn't stand it anymore. He picked up the blanket, walked over, and wrapped it around her body. Pucha Autumn Grass immediately felt warm all over and couldn't help but say in a small voice, "Thank you. Go sit over there for a while." Seeing her tottering appearance, Song Qingshu couldn't help but say. Pucha Autumn Grass hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she still nodded and followed him back to the bed. After all, no matter how unwilling she was, what should and shouldn't have happened had already happened. Why should she persist on some empty things? Give me your hand, Song Qingshu said. Pucha Autumn Grass blushed and sighed inwardly. In the end, she still handed her hand over. Holding the fair little hand in front of him, he felt that it was colder than ice. Knowing that she had probably caught a cold just standing there, Song Qingshu's mind moved, and a stream of jinqi flowed into her hand. Pucha Autumn Grass originally thought that he was going to do something after holding her hand, and she had already resigned herself to her fate. Who knew that a stream of warmth would flow into her body, making her feel as comfortable as soaking in a hot spring. Only then did she realize that she had misunderstood him. Sometimes, women were just that strange. A second ago, they might hate you to the bone, but the next second, they would have a completely different impression of you because of small matter. Pucha Autumn Grass was like this now. The man beside her wasn't as scary as she had imagined, and he had even saved her father and brother, and was also her first man. Unknowingly, she suddenly felt that the stubble on his face was somewhat pleasing to the eye. All right, you should rest first. Sensing that her body had warmed up again, Song Qingshu retracted his internal energy and stood up. You? Where are you going? Pucha Autumn Grass hadn't expected that she would take the initiative to ask him. For a moment, she was embarrassed and at a loss. Song Qingshu smiled slightly. Of course I'm going back. Do you think I'm going to continue defiling you here? Don't worry, I won't go back on what I promised you. After saying this, he put on his clothes and walked out. Pucha Autumn Grass opened her mouth, but in the end, she didn't say anything to stop him. After all, she was a pure and innocent girl, and she really couldn't bring herself to ask him to stay for the night. At this moment, a commotion suddenly came from outside. Song Qingshu couldn't help but frown. He opened the door and looked outside. Unfortunately, the place where the commotion was happening was some distance away, and he couldn't immediately figure out what was going on. Very quickly, Pucha Eliho and Wanyan Zhongjia also hurried over, their faces also filled with bewilderment. What exactly happened? Song Qingshu snorted. This is your residence. How would I know what happened? Pucha Elihu was worried that Zuin would misunderstand that this was a trap and an assassination, so she hurriedly explained, I really don't know what happened. I'll go ask someone in the front. She had just moved when Song Qingshu grabbed her. Don't go. Someone is charging in from outside. If you go, not only will you not be able to help, but you'll also be easily taken hostage. With Song Qingshu's current cultivation, he could naturally sense that someone was charging into the rear courtyard. This also dispelled his suspicions. If Pucha Elihu really wanted to set up a trap and assassinate him, he definitely wouldn't use such a reckless method. Furthermore, he only sent one person. What could they do to him? Marshal, an assassin, has charged in from outside. Right now, our brothers are delaying him. Marshal, please leave this place quickly. Monk Wanyan Chun hurried over and solemnly reported what had happened in the front courtyard. Chapter 1634. Monk Wanyan Chun smiled bitterly and said, although there is only one assassin, his martial arts skills are extremely high. Furthermore, the heavy sword in his hand is too powerful. Our brother's weapons were all shattered the moment they came into contact with it. No one was his match. Heavy sword? Song Qingshu found it vaguely familiar. What did he look like? Monk Wanyan quickly replied. The assassin looked quite young, and he was holding a pitch-black heavy sword. That's right, his right hand seemed to be broken. He was well-versed in both the pen and the sword, and he had always been observant. He only mentioned the most prominent features of the person, and as for the useless information like his handsome appearance, he automatically omitted it. It's him? Pucha Qiuzao had hastily put on her dress and walked out. She happened to hear Monk Chin's description and couldn't help but exclaim. Song Qingshu also had a strange expression. It really was a small world. Before he could finish sighing, there was a sound not far away. A few bodyguards had been sent flying back into the courtyard. A man walked in. His eyebrows were like swords, his eyes were like a phoenix, but his face was pale and haggard. Who else could it be but Yanghua? Yanghua barged in and didn't even look at the others. His gaze fell on Pucha Qiuzao, who was by the door. When he saw her messy dress, he couldn't help but frown. He said in a low voice, Miss Qiuzao, I'll take you away. It turned out that ever since Yanghua disappeared from the throne room, He had been searching for Xiao Longnu's whereabouts. It wasn't easy for him to hear that Xiao Longnu had appeared in the vicinity of Linen. In the end, he ran over and found nothing. Just as he was distressed and sad, he happened to hear a merchant from the north talking about the failed coup attempt by Pucha and Ahu. His entire family was thrown into prison. He immediately thought of his nominal fiancée. Although he didn't like her, now that she was in trouble and they had such a relationship, how could he just stand by and watch? It just so happened that he couldn't find any news of Xiao Longnu, so he decided to return to the Jin Kingdom and save Pucha Qiucao first. After asking around and doxing constabulary for a few days, he finally learned that she had come to the Grand Tutor's residence today. He wanted to sneak in and rescue her, but the security at the residence was much tighter than he had imagined. He had no choice but to expose himself. Brother Yang, looking at this betrothed fiancé, Pucha Autumn Grass's tears immediately flowed out. If he had come 2 hours earlier, she might have disregarded everything and left with him. But now, what should have happened had already happened. She had already been touched by another man. So how could she leave with him? Seeing that she didn't say anything and just silently cried, coupled with her untidy clothes and messy hair, how could Yangwa not guess what had happened? He couldn't help but snort coldly. This person bullied you. I'll kill him for you. As soon as he finished speaking, he swung the heavy sword in his hand at Song Qingshu like a ferocious tiger coming down from the mountain. If this strike landed, Song Qingshu would either be split in half or be smashed in a meat paste. During this period of time, all sorts of things had not been going his way. On top of that, he couldn't find Xiao Longnu. Yonggua had been suppressing his anger for a long time. Today, with the provocation of Pucha Autumn Grass, he instantly exploded. Song Qingshu, on the other hand, stood there unmoved. Instead, it was the women beside him and the guards who were panicking. The guards all raised their swords and charged over. But it was a pity that the ancient tomb sect's lightness kung fu was unparalleled in the martial world. Although Yonggua was wielding a heavy sword, they still couldn't catch up to him. Song Qingshu frowned and thought to himself, with Yonggua's level of martial arts, these guards probably won't be able to stop him. Don't tell me I have to do it myself. But if I do that, I might expose something. At this critical moment, Monk Wanyin Chun, who was beside him, roared in anger. He picked up a stone table beside him and used it as a weapon. The stone table probably weighed a few 100 pounds, but when he swung it around, it didn't seem to be at a disadvantage at all. Originally, many of the guards were unconvinced that Tang Kuo-bien had placed so much importance on him and rewarded him. But when they saw his innate divine strength, their jaws dropped and they no longer had any thoughts of being unconvinced. With a loud bang, the heavy sword and the stone table collided, creating a large series of sparks in the dark night. Unfortunately, the stone table's quality couldn't compare to the dark steel heavy sword. After the violent collision, it shattered into pieces, causing a huge commotion in the backyard. Everyone hurriedly dodged the flying stones. At the same time, a pile of stones flew towards Song Qingshu. Wanyan Zhongjia, who was beside him, waved his sword and skillfully flicked the stone to the other side. Even so, she still felt her wrist go numb. She couldn't help but secretly smack her lips at the strength of the blow. If one of the stones contained such strength, then one could imagine how much force the two of them had to endure at the center of the explosion. Monk Wanyin Chun flew backwards, rolling on the ground a few times before stabilizing himself. A trace of red flashed across his face. Clearly, he had suffered serious internal injuries just now. Yonggua wasn't much better off. He had to take a few steps back before he could steady himself. The collision just now had made his blood boil. Out of all the people he had seen, De Urba was the only one with innate divine strength. But the person in front of him had even more divine strength than De Urba. Men, take this assassin down. Pucha Elahu was both angry and anxious. If anything happened to Tang Kuo-bien here, then the entire Grand Preceptor's residence would be in trouble. At this time, the guards of the Grand Preceptor's residence and Tang Kuo-bien subordinates had already reacted. Many archers had already arrived and were waiting for the order to shoot 10,000 arrows through the heart. Yanghua frowned and directly stabbed his heavy sword into the ground. Then, he opened his mouth and let out a deep dragon's roar. The surrounding guard were caught off guard and were injured by his powerful sound waves. They all covered their ears and fell to the ground in pain. How could they still have the strength to hold their bows and arrows? Monk Wanyan Shun and Wanyan Zhongjia were stronger than the guards, so they could just barely hold on. Pucha Qiucao and Elihu were even weaker than the guards. Song Qing didn't want the two of them to be injured here, so he secretly held their hands and sent a wave of Jinqi into them. Immediately, the two of them felt the nauseous feeling in their hearts gradually disappear. Yanghua took advantage of the chaos of the surrounding guards to leap up and stab at Song Qingshu. Song Qingshu sighed inwardly. Now that things had come to this, he could only make a move. However, at this crucial moment, Pucha Qiucao suddenly spread out her arms and stood in front of him. "Wait!" Pucha Qiucao hurriedly shouted. At this time, she was also extremely afraid. If Yanghua couldn't retract his sword in time, she would probably end up like the stone slab. No, her fate would be even worse than the stone slabs. After all, her flesh and blood wasn't as sturdy as the stone slabs. Fortunately, Yanghua's martial arts had already reached perfection, and he could retract and release his sword as he pleased. The heavy sword stopped less than 3 inches away from her. What exactly is going on? Chapter 16:35. Brother Yang, thank you for coming to save me, but it's not what you think. I don't need your help. Please leave. Although Pucha Qiucao's words were calm, her heart was bleeding. Why didn't you come 2 hours earlier? Now that the rice had been cooked, what was the point of coming again? At this time, the remaining guards were about to charge over, but Song Qingshu raised his hand to stop them. Yang was swept a glance at the surrounding guards and said as if there was no one else present, "I heard that something happened to your family, so I dared to come and lend a hand." It would have been better if he hadn't said it, but the moment he did, Pucha Qiucao instantly felt wronged. You left when the throne room bestowed the marriage. What's the meaning of coming back now? When you left, it meant that our two families had severed all ties. You don't have to worry about what happens to our family. Miss Qiucao, I know I've let you down, but feelings can't be forced. I already have someone I like, so I can only let you down in this life. Yanghua's expression was apologetic. Although he felt apologetic towards other women, this woman in front of him had been hurt by him publicly breaking off the engagement. After he left, she had endured a lot of pressure. At the side, Song Qingshu had a strange expression. Why did it feel like he was watching a bitter drama? At the same time, he sighed inwardly that Pucha Qiucao could make him and Yanghua feel guilty toward her at the same time. It was truly miraculous. But at this time, Song Qingshu not only felt apologetic towards Pucha Qiucao, but he felt even more apologetic towards Yanghua. Not only had he slept with his fiancée, but he also had a close relationship with his sweetheart. What's going on? When I watched The Return of the Condor Heroes, I was really a fan of Yanghua. At this time, Song Qingshu only wanted to put a hand on his forehead. After interacting with the Yanghua of this world, whether it was his character or his chivalry, he was equally admirable. Song Qingshu was originally thinking of not breaking up the couple, but when he thought of Xiao Longnu, he dispelled the idea without hesitation. Then, he found out that Pucha Qiucao was actually Yang's fiancée. At that time, he was overjoyed because this could be considered as making up to Yanghua. But fate makes fools of people, and in the end, he ended up with Pucha Qiucao again. Thinking of this complicated relationship, he felt a headache coming on. He thought to himself, it seems that Qiucao can't do it anymore. I can only give Guixiang to him. Anyway, Xiang is still in Huang Rong's belly, and I can't have any thoughts about her. Robbing someone's girlfriend and giving him a daughter, is this deal a loss or not? Song Qingshu suddenly felt conflicted. As for Guoxiang's identity, he actually didn't care too much about it. No matter what, he would treat her as his daughter. What's the point of saying all this now? I don't want to hear it anyway. You should leave. Pucha Autumn Grass's voice jolted Song Qing-shu out of his little theater. Yangwa frowned. Although I can't guarantee anything else, at least I can get you out. Before he could finish, Pucha Chiozao immediately interrupted. I'm very well now. I don't need your help. Yangwa looked at Tang Quobian behind her in confusion and asked in a low voice, Is he threatening you? Don't be afraid, Pucha Chiozao replied quickly. No one is threatening me. I'm very happy now. Everything is of my own free will. Of your own free will? Yangwa was obviously not convinced. Pucha Chiozao snorted coldly. If it wasn't of my own free will, why would I take the initiative to block the knife for him? Yangwa's heart moved. Although he didn't really understand, he finally believed her words. He sheathed the dark steel heavy sword on his back and said a little desolately, If that's the case, it seems that I've been meddlesome. Goodbye. He had always been proud and arrogant, and he wouldn't tolerate Guofu's temper for even a second. He had treated Pucha Chiozao this time because he felt guilty, but now that she had said so, he wasn't the kind of person who would lower his head and pester her. Seeing that he was about to leave, the group of guards surrounded him, but Song Qing-shu raised his hand to stop them. Let him go. Yangwa's figure paused, but he didn't show any sign of gratitude. He quickly used his lightness skill and disappeared into the night sky. After he left, Song Qing-shu hurriedly ordered, Go call the doctor over and bandage the injured brother. I'll leave this matter to madam. No problem. Pucha Chiozao bowed and hurriedly went to arrange the servants in the residence. Wanyan Zhongjia was worried that he would be punished later, so he hurriedly followed. However, before he left, he couldn't help but wink at Song Qing-shu. This girl. Song Qing-shu couldn't help but laugh, but when he thought that it was her in the room just now, he couldn't help but feel warm. He then walked over and personally helped Wanyan chin up. The monk's face was full of shame. My lord, I'm useless. Song Qing-shu smiled and stopped him from continuing. With Yangwa's current martial arts, there are few in the world who can match up to him. It's already very rare for you to be able to force him to retreat. Moreover, you've mainly learned how to fight on the battlefield. Fighting in the pugilistic world isn't your forte. If you met him on the battlefield, I'm afraid the outcome would be completely different. Wan Yinshin originally had similar thoughts. If they met on the battlefield with a weapon in hand and the help of a horse, he was confident that he could defeat the other party. However, he felt that saying this was too much of an excuse, so he didn't explain himself lest others look down on him. Who knew that the other party would have the same thoughts as him? He instantly felt like a gentleman would die for a bosom friend. Song Qing-shu felt his pulse and quickly heaved a sigh of relief. Your internal organs were only slightly shaken. You'll be fine after a few days of rest. It seems that rolling on the ground just now was indeed useful. You dissolved more than half of the other party's strength. Wan Yinshan was a little embarrassed. I'm really in a sorry state. However, as someone who came from the battlefield, survival is the most important goal. I don't care if I look good or not. Song Qing-shu laughed heartily and patted him on the shoulder. Now that's a smart person. It's not good to suffer losses for some superficial things. You should go and rest first after arranging everything. Only Song Qing-shu and Pucha Chiozao were left in the courtyard. When he turned around, he saw that the young girl was already crying. He couldn't help but tease her. Since you can't bear to part with him, why didn't you leave with him just now? Pucha Chiozao was shocked and hurriedly explained. No, I'm not. She fell into a panic. What if she made him unhappy and he went back on his words? Song Qing-shu laughed. You don't have to be nervous. I'm just joking. I was also present when His Majesty bestowed the marriage to the two of you. I know your past. It's normal for you to be a little sad now. If you really don't care, I'll feel cold instead. Thank you, Pucha Chiozao replied in a small voice. Hearing his words, she couldn't stop her tears from falling. Looking at her tear-stained face, Song Qing-shu said meaningfully, Misfortune may turn out to be a blessing in disguise. Perhaps this is a very sad thing for you today, but in the future, when you look back, you will find that this separation is a blessing in disguise. I hope so. Pucha Chiozao forced a smile but she didn't think so. Today was probably the most difficult day of her life. Chapter 1636. This scene was familiar, but this time, Poocha Autumn Grass was much more natural than before. She slowly walked over and sat beside him. Perhaps what had just happened had made her realize her current situation, and she chose to give up. But that was no longer important. Song Qing-shu stretched out his hand to gently wipe away the tears on her face. Poocha Chiotsao's body trembled, but she did not reject him. His hand slid across her youthful face that was filled with collagen, down her slender and soft neck, before landing on her clothes. Since he had given up on the idea of fulfilling her wish, Song Qing-shu naturally did not feel conflicted. After all the torment today, it was time for a good rest. When a man's fingers touched her skin, Poocha Autumn Grass's body tensed up, and a layer of goosebumps appeared on the surface of her skin. But on second thought, I've already been, why should I persist? So she lowered her head and acquiesced to his actions. Now that he knew the whole story, Song Qing-shu naturally would not be as angry as before and began to use his methods to flirt with the girl. Poocha Autumn Grass had never experienced this before, and soon her eyes became misty. Her body also let down her guard, and she became softer and softer. Now that he had returned to his hometown, his mood was completely different from before. Looking at the young girl's moist red lips, Song Qing-shu suddenly felt a little disdainful of himself. Because when he thought about how the young girl was thinking about her fiancé, yet she had no choice but to moan and sing under him, this kind of feeling was extremely satisfying, right? He really had the potential to be a big villain. The next morning, Song Qing-shu quietly left. Although he was a little soft-hearted, he was not a good person without principles. He could not give every woman he was related to a status, and with his current identity as Tang Kuobian, it was not appropriate for him to get involved with the Poocha family. This time, he had let Poocha father and son go, and he had already given enough bargaining chips. The only thing he could guarantee was that he would secretly take care of her. After the man left, Poocha Chiosher slowly opened her eyes. Although she was tired after a night of torment, how could a young girl fall asleep in such a situation? It was just that she did not know how to face this man, so she pretended to be asleep. Why does he give me such a familiar feeling, just like the person in my dream? Poocha Huzeo mumbled to herself. Song Qing-shu's great soul-shifting art was not omnipotent. Although he had erased the memories of that night at the Chuanjin sect, she would often dream of some scenes, and every scene would cause her face to flush red and her body to go limp. This matter had been bothering her for a long time. After all, it was really embarrassing for a girl to have that kind of dream from time to time. Although it was a little distressing that she could not tell others about it, she also understood that it was just an illusion. However, the feeling last night seemed to be exactly the same as the feeling in the dream. It doesn't seem to be as painful as I imagined. Recalling the events of last night, the young girl hurriedly reached out to touch her cheeks. She discovered that it was already boiling hot, and for a moment, she couldn't help but fall into a daze. Meanwhile, when Song Qing-shu left the main gate and was planning to return to the marshal's residence, a eunuch was already waiting outside. Seeing him come out, the eunuch hurriedly ran over with a fawning expression. "Lord Marshal, His Majesty requests that you immediately go to the palace to see him." Song Qing-shu's face heated up. He thought that Gebai had indeed found out that he had stayed overnight at the Grand Preceptor's residence. For some reason, Gebai was clearly not his wife, but there was a sense of home about her, making him feel as if he had been caught cheating on her by his wife. "How long has eunuch been waiting here?" Song Qing-shu asked awkwardly. "This servant has been waiting here for 4 hours." The eunuch revealed a dubious expression. Song Qing-shu cursed inwardly. "You damned eunuch, you've already been castrated, yet you're still so nosy about the affairs of a man and a woman. Be careful that I don't send someone to castrate you again. Why didn't you send someone to inform me?" The eunuch cupped his hands in greeting in the direction of the palace. "His Majesty has specifically instructed us not to disturb the marshal in advance." We have to let the marshal come out after he has rested enough. This servant has been in the palace for so many years, but has never seen the emperor treat his subjects with such kindness. Marshal is the only one, automatically ignoring the unceasing flattery of the eunuch. Song Qingshu's heart was incomparably warm. Gubai was clearly jealous, but she was considerate that he had just arrived at Daxing Prefecture after a long journey. She was worried that she would send someone to disturb his rest, so she purposely instructed her subordinates not to disturb him in advance. With a wife like this, what more could a husband ask for? This time, Song Qingshu did not take a carriage. To save time, he rode a horse directly to the palace. The Jin Kingdom did not hold court every day. Knowing that the emperor was currently in the imperial study, reading through memorials, he rushed there without any obstructions. Not long after, he arrived at the imperial study. He discovered that other than Gubai, Wan Yinping, the Purple Dragon Queen, and Taiji Si were all there. He couldn't help but awkwardly greet them. "Hi, good morning, beauties." Gubai smiled faintly. "It's almost noon. Good morning?" Song Qingshu smiled awkwardly and wisely did not respond to the conversation. It was Wan Yinping who could not restrain herself. She curled her lips and mumbled, "Sister waited for you all night yesterday. I don't know what's so good about that old woman." Her words made Gubai blush. She spat and said, "Who waited for him the whole night? You were the one who asked that yourself." Taiji Si looked on coldly from the side and added fuel to the fire. Pucha Elihu was the #1 beauty of the Jin Kingdom in the past. "Of course she's good," Wan Yinping said indignantly. "It's all in the past. The #1 beauty of the Jin Kingdom is my sister." Taiji Si smiled faintly. "House flowers are never as fragrant as wildflowers." Song Qingshu glared at her fiercely and said using the secret voice sending, "Madam is getting bolder. It seems that I need to find a chance to tidy you up." Taiji Si blushed. She turned her head away guiltily. However, she had fanned the flames enough. Wan Yinping glared at Song Qingshu. "Brother-in-law, you still want Elihu despite her bad reputation. Don't you think?" "Shut up." Gubai stopped her at the right time. "No matter what, she is still your sister-in-law." Wan Yinping stuck out her tongue. She did not know why, but she was a little afraid of her gentle sister. Although she did not know martial arts, there were times when her words carried a sense of dignity. According to the spy's report, there seemed to be assassins in the Grand Preceptor's mansion last night. "Are you all right?" Gubai looked at Song Qingshu and asked. Hearing this, Song Qingshu's heart warmed. She did not question him about the affair last night. She did not ask about anything else. Instead, she was concerned about his safety. Tang Quobian must have been lucky to marry such a perfect wife. Beside him, Taiji Si silently cursed. This girl looked as pure as a little white flower. In reality, she was the best at pleasing men. With Song Qingshu's shocking cultivation, what kind of assassin in this world could hurt him? She clearly saw that he was unharmed, and yet she deliberately asked such a question. "I'm fine." The assassin last night was the grandson of the king of Zhao, Wanyan Honglai, Wanyan. Song Qingshu roughly explained what happened last night. Chapter 16:37. Song Qingshu unhappily glared at Tadish beside him. This is all thanks to a certain someone. Tadish cast her gaze outside the window, acting as if this matter had nothing to do with her. Elihu is from the Pucha family and has the intention to save his family. It is understandable that he resorted to such a method, but it is a pity for that last Xiao Chao. Gubai sighed faintly, as if thinking that in this chaotic world, even the daughters of rich families were helpless and unable to control their own destinies. Are we really going to release Pucha, Ahu, and the rest? Tadish could not help but ask. Before Song Qingshu could reply, Gubai answered on her behalf. The Pucha family has deep roots in the Jin Kingdom, so it's not a good idea to exterminate them completely. It's good to take this opportunity to release them in order to win over the hearts of the people. However, we can't give them complete freedom. It's best to imprison them in a manner and release them after a few years. Song Qingshu nodded. They are indeed husband and wife. What a coincidence! Upon hearing him mention the word husband and wife, the room suddenly fell into a strange silence. Be it the good sisters or Tadish, they all knew that they were not truly husband and wife. Reporting urgent military news. At this moment, the guards outside broke the silence in the room. As the ladies did not disguise themselves, Song Qing-shu went out to receive the urgent memorial. What's the situation? Seeing him enter, the ladies asked curiously. After all, urgent reports were the highest priority. If it was not an absolutely important matter, the punishment for using such a memorial would be severe. I don't know. It seems to be a memorial from Guangzhou. As soon as Song Qing-shu said this, everyone's heart sank. Could it be that Sichuan had already started a northern expedition to Guangzhou? Song Qing-shu hurriedly opened the seal and read the memorial. She could not help but exclaim, "How is this possible?" The ladies curiously poked their heads over. When they saw the contents of the memorial, their expressions became incomparably interesting. It turned out that the memorial was sent by the garrison general of Fengxiang Prefecture. Fengxiang Prefecture was the western barrier of Guangzhou and also guarded the southern Song dynasty's strategic route out of Sichuan. The reason why they were so surprised was that the governor of Fengxiang Prefecture had mentioned in the memorial that the southern Song dynasty's deputy governor of Sichuan had sent a secret envoy to the Jin kingdom to surrender, asking the Jin kingdom to bestow him the title of king of Shu and acknowledge his identity. How was this possible? Song Qing-shu sighed again. Others might not know who Wu Shi was, but how could he not know? Wu Shi was actually Ling Hu Chong. Although Ling Hu Chong was unruly, he was not the type. Why is it impossible? Sichuan is easy to defend and hard to attack. As long as they close their borders, it will be difficult for outsiders to enter Sichuan. Therefore, since ancient times, there have been many separatist forces in Sichuan. Moreover, as if there is a curse, the generals who pacify Sichuan will easily have the idea of rebelling. For example, every time the Central Plains dynasty attacks Sichuan, the emperor will be very careful in choosing the generals. Now that Wu Shi controls Sichuan's military, political, and financial power, it is not strange that he wants to be the king of Shu. Song Qing-shu smiled bitterly. Others might, but it's impossible for Wu Shi. Why? The ladies were curious as to why he was so sure. Song Qing-shu hesitated for a moment, but thinking that they were not outsiders and there was nothing to hide, he told them Wu Shi's true identity. Wu Shi is Ling Hu Chong in disguise? The three ladies looked at each other in shock. Yes, Ling Hu Chong has always been a chivalrous person and has no ambition. I believe that he will serve the country, but it is impossible for him to betray it. Song Qing-shu said in a low voice. Tosh Tish nodded. I have heard of Ling Hu Chong. He will not commit treason. It seems that this is most likely a fake surrender. We need to inform the garrison general of Fengxiang Prefecture to be careful. Yes. Song Qing-shu came to the table, quickly wrote a secret edict, stamped it with the imperial seal, and sent a secret messenger to deliver it to Fengxiang Prefecture. Then why not just announce to the world that Wu Shi is someone else in disguise? Wouldn't the threat in Sichuan be destroyed? Wang Yanping was confused. She was in charge of the laundry yard and had always been good at intelligence and spy work. In her eyes, this was a great opportunity. Song Qing-shu replied in a low voice. In fact, I had thought of this before, but after I met Han Xingzhou, I gave up on the idea. He is an ambitious man, and even if he knows Ling Hu Chong's identity, he will only make the best of the mistake. As for the Wu family, do they not know that Ling Hu Chong is not Wu Tianda? But they still did not say anything. Obviously, they need him to restore the glory of the Wu family. What's more, Ling Hu Chong is an orphan. At worst, he'll come back to his family. As long as the Wu family acknowledges him, no one else can say anything. But Jia Shidao won't let go of such a good opportunity. Gubai had been in power for a long time, so he obviously knew the structure of the southern Song dynasty. That's what I find strange. Song Qing-shu looked confused. With Jia Shidao's cautiousness, it's impossible that he didn't investigate Wu Shi, who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. With the intelligence of his subordinates, he should have already found out that Ling Hu Chong is Wu Shi in disguise. But why hasn't he used this to cause trouble? Jia Dao had the official intelligence network, and he also had the secret intelligence network of the Isle of Heroes. In particular, the power of the Isle of Heroes was all-pervasive. They even knew what the leaders of some small sects had for dinner the day before. So how could they not find out Wu Shi's identity? Since he hasn't caused trouble, let's make the situation more complicated. Wang Yinping smiled like a fox. Song Qingshu nodded. That's good. At least we can make them anxious and buy some time. Judging from the current strange situation, it probably wouldn't have much effect, but it was still possible to buy some time. Report. Just then, another urgent message came in from outside. Song Qingshu went out and brought the secret memorial in. When he opened it, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The defending general of Fengxiang Prefecture has submitted another memorial, saying that Wu Shi has given him the military deployment maps of Shengyuan and Sangwon. It was no wonder that he was surprised. There were several roads from Bashu to Sichuan, but the best one was Chinsong Road. The San Pass was in the middle of Chinsong Road. It was a very dangerous place to defend, and it was a very important place for military strategists. The San Pass was controlled by the Southern Song dynasty, and Sangwon was a highland in the northeast of the San Pass. Together with the San Pass, they controlled the Sichuan and Shaanxi transportation routes. If they wanted to break through the San Pass, they had to take Sangwon first. If they lost Sangwon, it would be difficult to defend the San Pass. Now that Wu Shi gave the military deployment maps of these two places to the Jin Kingdom, didn't it mean that he was giving the two northern gates to the Jin Kingdom? Chapter 1638. Independence is impossible. Either Ling Huchong is faking his surrender, or Song Qingshu sank in a deep thought. Or something has happened in Sichuan. Something has happened. The women looked at each other, unsure of what he meant. There is too little information to judge. Ping arranged for the spies of the laundry brothel to investigate what has happened in Sichuan, especially if Wu Shi is different from usual. Song Qingshu said, "Okay, I will go now." Wang Yinping nodded and turned to leave. "Hey, wait a minute," Song Qingshu called out to her. "There's one more thing. Later, arrange a place for Pucha and Ahu to be placed under house arrest, and then go to the prison to release them." Wang Yinping said with a smile that was not a smile, "You want to do something to make up for taking advantage of Qiu Chao?" Song Qingshu's face darkened. "She is also your good sister. Don't you want to help? Qiu Chao did come to find me a few times, but I was worried that I would ruin your plans, so I did not let her go." Wang Yinping sighed. "If I had known that you would let them go in the end, I would have let them go earlier. I could have done Qiu Chao a favor." As she spoke, she sighed and left, leaving the people in the room to look at each other. Song Qingshu's face heated up, and he felt somewhat awkward. He quickly changed the topic. "We cannot passively wait for the laundry brothel to investigate. We need to work from two fronts. Send an army to probe and attack. Then we will know if he has really surrendered or is faking it. Who should we send? Right now, Fu Sanzhongyi and Husher Lai Jining are leading the main force of the court to guard Huainan West Road and Dengtang Prefecture. Fu Sananjin is leading an army to confront the Redcoat Army. It is difficult to defend Guangzhou if we take the initiative to attack," Gu Hubai said with a worried expression. Song Qingshu said with confidence, "I already have a suitable candidate in mind." "How was the formation of the loyal army that Tajtish asked you to form?" Naturally, Tadish knew what was on his mind. She hastily replied, "We've already selected several valiant soldiers and promoted several middle-ranking officers. However, we haven't been able to find a suitable commander. Moreover, the entire army hasn't been trained for long. I'm afraid I've already found a commander. As for the short training time, it's not a problem. Since they're all brave soldiers selected from the army, they naturally can't be trained like ordinary soldiers." Song Qingshu looked towards the southwest. The best training ground is always the real battlefield. Only through the tempering of blood and fire can a true tiger and wolf be trained. Will they suffer heavy losses if they enter the battlefield directly? Gobai asked worriedly. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be wise to let them enter the battlefield directly. However, we're only letting them test the waters. If the surrender is fake, they'll immediately retreat. If the surrender is real, then they'll be working together from the inside. Regardless of the situation, the danger they'll face will be much smaller than in a normal battle. Song Qing-shu paused for a moment before continuing in a deep voice. If they can't even overcome such difficulties, then there's no need for their army to exist. His goal in establishing the loyal army was to create an elite of elites loyal to him. Moreover, with a historical general like Monk Wanyan-shun leading them, he didn't believe that they couldn't accomplish such a simple task. First, bring me to the loyal army's barracks to take a look. During this period of time, he had been constantly on the move and hadn't had the chance to meet this army that would belong to him in the future. All right, the loyal army's barracks is 10 li west of the city. Do you want to take a look now? Tadish's eyes were filled with excitement. After all, she was the one who planned this matter. If she did it well, she would be able to raise her position in the other party's heart. Although she possessed a peerless beauty that could turn all living things upside down, she wasn't used to seducing people with her looks. Therefore, it was impossible for her to take the initiative to seduce Song Qing-shu. Therefore, she could only prove her worth in another way. The more he valued her, the higher the chances of persuading him to send troops to assist the Persian main altar. All right, there's no time to lose. Song Qing-shu understood that the opportunity was fleeting. If he couldn't grasp the opportunity of the other party's surrender, it would be too late for regrets if an unforeseen event were to happen. As Gubai had to pretend to be the emperor to oversee the palace, it was naturally inconvenient for her to accompany him. After bidding farewell to her, Song Qing-shu and Tadish rode towards the barracks in the west of the city. The two of them rode side by side, with Monk Wanyan-shun and the numerous imperial guards in front and behind them, faintly protecting them in the middle. Tadish took this opportunity to whisper to Song Qing-shu, "According to the selection criteria you mentioned earlier, only 3,000 loyal and filial soldiers have been selected. However, once the war in the south is over, there should be more soldiers to choose from. The quality of the soldiers does not depend on the quantity. 3,000 is more than enough." Song Qing-shu understood that due to the Southern Song dynasty's northern expedition, most of the Jin imperial court's main forces had been transferred to the south. It was already a miracle that she could still select 3,000 elite soldiers. As for the number of soldiers, as a transmigrator, he naturally understood that in ancient wars, the more soldiers the better. Battles involving hundreds of thousands or even millions of soldiers would often end in failure. With the communication system of ancient times, it was impossible to effectively command hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Often, when the vanguard troops were routed, the follow-up troops would not be able to reach the battlefield in time. When they saw the defeated vanguard troops, they would also flee. This was because fear was contagious. The number of people who died from trampling each other far exceeded those who died in battle. Another fatal factor was logistics. The most important factor in a war was logistics. Once there was a problem with logistics, even the most elite troops would instantly lose their combat strength. With the transportation system of ancient times, it was practically a fantasy to supply food to an army of hundreds of thousands. In the past, the wealthy Sui dynasty sent an army of 1,000,000 on an expedition to Korea. However, due to the long supply line, the government forced the people to rebel, causing the entire empire to collapse. Therefore, in history, those battles involving hundreds of thousands of soldiers were either exaggerated boasting by one side, or the entire logistics force was taken into account. The actual combat force was only a fraction or even a tenth of the total. Therefore, in ancient times, an elite army of tens of thousands was the optimal choice. It balanced combat strength, flexibility, and logistical pressure. It was far more effective than simply sacrificing hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Although there were only 3,000 soldiers in the loyal army, after the baptism of blood and fire, these 3,000 elite soldiers were the seeds of the loyal army. They were the skeleton of the loyal army. As long as the skeleton remained, the loyal army could expand to several tens of thousands of soldiers at any time without a drop in combat strength. Tajtish then introduced him to the middle and high-ranking officers of the loyal army. Currently, the loyal army has a total of 6 deputy commanders. They were all selected according to your requirements. They're talented, but have always been down and out. The first is Pusan Fan. He used to be the deputy envoy of the Imperial Guard Bureau and the deputy commander of the Imperial Guard Bureau. Because he discussed the affairs of the Imperial Guards in private, he was reported and eventually dismissed. I've investigated him. He is an upright and decisive person. Moreover, in his early years at the border, he had outstanding military service. He is a rare talent. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.